Chapter 31, Unscrupulous Tactics in Any Negotiation. The simplest path to success is by giving the other side what they want. This isn't surrender, it's finding equilibrium in mutual interests. Had Microsoft's negotiator been Bill Gates himself, Martin would have shared his prized Beatles vinyl along with Lafayette's absinthe. Yes, the famed winery produces it, though few acquire the taste, while waxing poetic about Facebook's stratospheric trajectory. But facing a mere VP from Microsoft's venture arm? Martin delegated the dog and pony show to Facebook's planning team. A flashy PowerPoint, juxtaposing Facebook's explosive growth against MySpace's stagnation, was all the mid-level exec needed to save face back in Seattle. 3 days later, a Microsoft board director arrived in California with a legal battalion. Martin sent Zuckerberg to schmooze on the golf course while he and Priya faced off against Microsoft's lawyers. The talks were a tense diplomatic showdown, with all the shebang of calculated smiles and veiled threats. Within 2 days, every clause was settled midline horizontal ellipsis except valuation. Frankly, Martin pitied the Yale-trained lawyers Zuckerberg had axed. Their draft terms were airtight, no wonder he'd coasted through 170 pages of agreements. The real battle lay in agreement about the current valuation of the company. Hence enters the bet-on agreements or valuation adjustment mechanisms, VAM, for tech-savvy. Don't scoff at it, since the dawn of trade, wagers have been used to smooth out the way for negotiations. Take futures markets as an example, they are in layman terms institutionalized betting markets. So to remove valuation deadlocks, a VAM was added in which valuation was contingent upon its future performance against predefined metrics. All that mattered was Zuckerberg's faith in my decision. And faith he had. Since founding their Mutual Aid Society, Martin's macroeconomic forecasts had been proven infallible. On the third day, Martin strode onto the greens wearing Slazenger's royal-approved golf gear, a sartorial nod to Clark Hunt, Microsoft's 70-year-old British director and honorary knight. "I'd thought Americans disdained their roots," Hunt remarked, eyeing Martin's ensemble. "Try squeezing into these pants," Martin inwardly groaned, smiling. "Tradition inspires innovation, sir." As they teed off, Zuckerberg played the eager pupil, "Mr. Hunt's pro, I'm just here to lose gracefully." Hunt chuckled. "Youth has its priorities. At your age, I'd have chosen spreadsheets over sand traps too." Martin's first drive hooked wildly. "God's whims, not mine," Hunt consoled, ever the diplomat. Then, a fluke hot happened. On the 15th hole, Martin's ball arced into the cup. $500 tips all around. He hooped, Zuckerberg added burgers, Hunt added cokes. The camaraderie cost less than a billable hour. By the 17th, scores laid bare their skills, Hunt, 69, Martin, 75, Zuckerberg, 77. Amateurs, save the night. At the final tee, Hunt spoke up, "About your valuation bet, let's raise the stakes. Birdie this hole, I will accept the valuation of $18 billion, but if you miss $12 billion. $6 billion on a swing." Zuckerberg glanced at Martin nervously. Martin adjusted his grip and swung forcefully. "Instead of the bet, how about we meet halfway at a $15 billion valuation with a $300 million max investment? Or, who knows, I might actually put it in hole." Before Hunt could protest, Martin launched his drive. The ball landed 30 feet from glory. A pro golfer could almost certainly make a birdie. But for an amateur like Martin, it was all up to God. But Martin didn't care. If young people didn't play dirty, who will? Chapter 32. To alleviate eye strain from prolonged use of phones or laptops. 1. Follow the 20-20-20 rule. Every 20 minutes, take a break for at least 20 seconds to look at something 20 feet away. This practice helps relax the eye muscles and reduces fatigue. 2. Take regular breaks. In addition to the 20-20-20 rule, aim for a longer break of about 15 minutes every 2 hours. Use this time to stand up, stretch, and move around to relieve overall tension. 3. Adjust your viewing distance. Maintain a comfortable distance from your screen, ideally 13 to 20 inches for smartphones and small tablets, and more than 20 inches for larger screens. Avoid bringing devices too close to your eyes. 4. Optimize lighting conditions. Ensure that the room lighting is similar in brightness to your screen to avoid glare and reduce strain. Use indirect lighting and minimize reflections on your screen. 5. Blink frequently. Staring at screens often leads to reduced blinking, which can cause dryness. Make a conscious effort to blink more often to keep your eyes moist. 6. Use proper screen settings. Adjust the brightness and contrast of your screen for comfort, and consider using blue light filters or glasses if you spend extended periods in front of screens. 7. Stay hydrated. Drink plenty of water throughout the day to maintain overall hydration, which can also benefit eye moisture levels. By implementing these strategies, individuals can significantly reduce the discomfort associated with extended screen time and promote better eye health. Chapter 33. Lord Clark's probe. The day after the golf game, Clark Hunt officially signed the financing contract on behalf of Microsoft's board of directors. Microsoft acquired 1.6% of Facebook's shares for $240 million and pledged to provide market channel support to Facebook. With Microsoft's backing, Facebook's valuation officially reached $15 billion. Aside from these two companies, Martin also reaped significant rewards. First, he secured the chief legal counsel contract for Facebook, valued at $2.1 million annually. According to the distribution ratio, Martin would receive $700,000, Priya over $300,000, and the remaining $1 million would go to the law firm as dividends. Then there were the fees for this case. In the U.S., the Bar Association stipulates that for commercial transactions exceeding $50 million, lawyers must charge no less than 1%. Hence, senior business lawyers are often referred to as one-percenters. Specifically, for this financing project, Facebook would pay $2.4 million in legal fees, half to the firm, over $900,000 to Martin, and $400,000 to Priya. In other words, Martin Scott, who had only graduated 2 months ago, was now a bona fide millionaire. And not paper one anymore. Since the 1% shares are all tied up in charity for the time being, even if their paper value is high, which can be only realized once company goes public. Priya wasn't far behind either. With her salary included, she rounded up to the threshold of a millionaire, far surpassing her brother Rajesh, who earned just over $8,000 a month. In terms of family status, Martin couldn't help but feel that Rajesh was about to follow in Leonard's footsteps. Don't think that it's very unreasonable for the firm to take such a large share of fees without doing much. But don't forget, Martin is just starting out. Without the reputation and support of Pearson Hardman law firm, none of this would have been possible. Sometimes brand is the most valuable asset. After signing the contract, Facebook's executives hosted a press conference and celebratory cocktail party. Many high-ranking executives from Silicon Valley tech companies scrambled to find ways to attend. They were all here for Clark Hunt. However, after skillfully brushing off these tech elites, Clark approached Martin Scott, who was quietly observing the scenery by a window in the corner. After yesterday's golf game, Clark had taken notice of this unusually young lawyer and had asked someone to investigate him. The results were quite surprising. At 16, Martin entered Harvard's history department. At 20, he graduated as valedictorian and delivered the commencement speech. That same year, he enrolled in Harvard Law School and, 5 years later, graduated top of his class with a Juris Doctor degree. Within a month of joining the law firm, he was promoted to senior lawyer. Recently, he'd handled a criminal case involving BMW and seemed to manage a private equity charity fund with undisclosed shareholders. Midline horizontal ellipsis. This was no longer a person that could simply be described as a genius. You don't seem to enjoy these kinds of events much. As a lawyer, isn't this the perfect opportunity to network with potential big clients? Clark said, his well-preserved face showing few wrinkles resembling those of presidents who cared deeply about appearances. Is there anyone here more important than you? Martin smiled and clinked glasses with him. Besides, I'm not just Zuckerberg's legal counsel. He then turned toward the venue and waved. Soon, 6 or 7 members of the mutual aid group based in Los Angeles walked over with champagne to greet them. Why didn't you bring Howard? He still owes me a visit to the cigar lounge. Congratulations on taking a solid step in your legal career. Want to try my mom's Spanish paella tomorrow? As the executive director overseeing Microsoft's investment affairs, Clark quickly recognized these rising stars of the internet industry. 3 of them were targets he had closely monitored over the past 2 years. Despite his years of experience, Clark was momentarily stunned by the situation. However, a thought suddenly crossed his mind. Perhaps the mysterious shareholders of that private charity Hope were these people standing before him. Seeing the fleeting surprise on Clark's face, Martin secretly felt smug. All those years of effort, wasn't it just for the chance to show off in front of old-timers like you? Everyone, Mr. Clark Hunt, personally knighted by the Queen as Lord Clark and Senior Director of Microsoft's board. Midline horizontal ellipsis. Martin introduced Clark to his companions, then chuckled self-deprecatingly. Perhaps my introduction was unnecessary. After all, who in the tech and finance circles doesn't know Mr. Clark? None of these mutual aid group members were pushovers. Upon hearing Martin's words, they immediately caught on. After brief introductions, they began flattering Clark by referencing his proudest achievements. Preparation was an open secret among all excellent students. Clark, hailing from British high society, excelled in such social settings. He smiled and commented on the enterprises behind these individuals, expressing interest and stating he had been following them closely, hoping for future collaboration opportunities. After exchanging pleasantries, Martin gave a subtle signal. The founders tactfully excused themselves, leaving only Martin and Clark smiling at each other. Clark has been in high society before even Martin was born. When all those guys suddenly came and then went away together, he understood what power play might be going on, but that didn't mean he wanted to do anything about it. No, all these tricks are part of the game. Whether one can understand these at a glance or not differentiate the players and pawns. Martin, still young and new to these games, unaware of Clark's thoughts, raised his glass first in a toast. I hope my friends made you feel welcome, Lord Clark. I'm pleasantly surprised, Martin, Clark said. Thank you for introducing them. Your friends are very promising. I wasn't merely flattering when I said I've been following them, Martin shrugged. I never doubt the sincerity of a lord." Clark clearly agreed with this sentiment and replied, "Though chivalry has waned in this restless era, it doesn't stop those of us with admiration from pursuing those noble virtues." This abrupt statement left Martin with no way to respond. He could only smile, sipping his champagne to mask his awkwardness. Unexpectedly, Clark spoke first. "Young man, I seem to see your ambition." Martin looked puzzled. "From Zuckerberg to those founders just now, it seems you're focused on the internet?" Martin shrugged noncommittally. The wealthy elites of traditional industries wouldn't easily entrust their life and death legal matters to someone as young as me. I can only seek breakthroughs among similarly young entrepreneurs. Naturally, the boundless opportunities in the internet and tech industries make them the prime choice. So, you chose to use a charity to stabilize and maintain your relationships with clients? Clark suddenly asked, his sharp gaze fixed on Martin's eyes, trying to discern something. Martin frowned slightly, then quickly relaxed. Was it so easy for someone at the top of an industry to probe his background? Not like it was any confidential information, but still. End of chapter. Chapter 34. New members for the Foundation. Faced with Clark's probing, Martin wasn't overly concerned. The Mutual Aid Group and the Hope Charity weren't some evil organizations. There was no need to deliberately conceal anything or create an air of mystery. "You're talking about the Hope Charity?" "Yes. 1% of the shares of all enterprises founded by my clients are in it." Mark's girlfriend, Priscilla Chan, handles the day-to-day operations. Currently, it mainly focuses on investing in primary education in developing countries. Although charities are what they are in terms of offering tax avoidance and inflation resistance benefits. However, I still hope that the members genuinely love charitable causes. "Would you be interested in joining, Mr. Clark?" "I don't expect shares from Microsoft, but we can do with cash or other stocks." Now it was Clark's turn to be surprised. He hadn't expected Martin to be so forthcoming with the information. More so, he even had the audacity to hint at Microsoft and himself. Clark became intrigued by this complex young lawyer. He wanted to know how a rookie lawyer, just 25 years old and freshly graduated, managed to convince these rapidly growing founders of high-tech internet companies to willingly contribute 1% of their shares, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, to a charity fund with no profitability. Since Martin was being open, Clark didn't beat around the bush and directly voiced his doubts. Martin straightforwardly recounted what Priscilla Chan had once told Rachel, omitting only details related to the Mutual Aid Group. "Facebook and LinkedIn were both founded under my suggestion. As for MS, I provided some cash or market support during their early stages." Clark, who had a background in investments, couldn't help but admire Martin upon hearing how he had turned the legal profession into a business model akin to venture capital. "I must say, your emergence has brought me too many surprises. While other lawyers are still chasing after already successful tycoons or celebrities, you've successfully carved out a new path. What you've done isn't much different from us. Judging by the results, you have a keen sense of investment and vision. Simply being a lawyer seems like a waste of your talent. Are you interested in giving Microsoft a try? I can offer you the position of Deputy Chief Legal Counsel of Microsoft's Investment Strategy Committee. And yes, with voting rights." Martin never expected Clark to hold him in such high regard. He was momentarily stunned by the offer. After a while, Martin shook his head apologetically. Ever since I saw Law on TV when I was 10, I've aspired to become a full-time lawyer. For that, I started studying legal texts in middle school, and even spent my summer social practice at a law firm in Texas. I love the law. It's the cornerstone and rule of a civilized society. I want to master it, not merely use it to gain wealth or social status. Lord Clark, do you understand what I mean? Although it did reflect Martin's thoughts to some extent, it wasn't exactly all true. Half of it was hogwash, like LA law, or social status, part. While there were many ways he could get rich or have social contacts, those things won't cement him or his legacy, metaphorical or literal heir, in these United States of America, if he doesn't have some tangible way to get some power to bend people to do his bidding illegally or legally. Money, status, power are the trioca required of any and all legacy to exist. And their individual strength and combination define the length and strength of it. None can be players in the game with only one, at least two are required to fix their butts at the table, but I digress. We will cross this bridge when we get there. Clark Hunt scrutinized Martin up and down for a while before finally shaking his head with a hint of regret. I deeply admire your loyalty to the law and your self-awareness. It was impolite of me. Martin smiled. No need to apologize. Your invitation itself is the best recognition of my efforts over the years. Since recruitment attempts hadn't worked, Clark didn't dwell on it and smoothly changed the topic. Let's talk about your charity again. Are there any new members worth my and Microsoft's attention recently? Martin thought for a moment, hesitating slightly. There might be, but I've been busy sorting out my work-related matters and haven't had time to reach out to new members. Based on the current progress, it might happen after the new year. Perhaps we'll have more opportunities for collaboration. Clark waved over a waiter from the cocktail party and had fresh champagne poured for both of them. Microsoft has always been looking for valuable or promising enterprises and individual entrepreneurs. We're happy to provide them with funding and marketing support. At present, your charity's members represent an excellent client channel for us. Perhaps sometime we can sit down and discuss the details of joining the Hope Charity. A $10 million investment or equivalent stock wasn't a problem for either Microsoft or Clark Hunt personally. In recent years, as tech companies' valuations inflated like balloons, the cost of acquiring clients in the investment industry had skyrocketed. Exchanging $10 million in projected 5-year returns for investment opportunities in 13 high-growth companies seemed like a very profitable deal to Clark. Not to mention the young lawyer's eye for potential. If he could establish a cooperative relationship with Martin, who knows what future investment opportunities might arise. I'd be delighted. Martin raised his glass in acknowledgement. I personally thank Microsoft and Lord Clark for your attention to charitable causes. I believe this will also be a great opportunity for my clients to make a pilgrimage and further expand their influence. Bill Gates was one of the top bosses in a manner of speaking in his past life. Martin felt he was one step closer to the top. Never did he expect that the troublesome little brother would bring him such a great opportunity, advancing his plans for the future so much. This trip was worth it. The next day, Martin Scott and Clark Hunt had lunch together. Zuckerberg didn't show up, but Priscilla Chan and Rachel Zane accompanied them as the charity's manager and administrative director, respectively. Yes, after the mutual aid group's party in New York, Martin had given Rachel the additional title of administrative director for the foundation. Since the foundation had only been operational for 2 years and didn't have much to do on a daily basis, taking on the role part-time wasn't a problem. Plus, it came with a modest salary that was somewhat respectable. Priscilla enthusiastically introduced the foundation's relevant details to Lord Clark, while Rachel assisted by displaying pictures and text materials. It was vivid and engaging. Clark Hunt appeared very interested, even interrupting Priscilla occasionally to ask for specific details. His oily and insincere performance made Martin's skin crawl. Those founders may have seemed impressive, but they were still in the phase of burning money to capture market share. None of them had gone public yet. Though the shares in the foundation were valued at $1 billion, they currently generated no profit, meaning there was no money to run charitable projects. As a result, since its establishment, the Hope Foundation had only built 2 Hope primary schools in Asia, one funded by the founders pooling their resources, and the other from Martin's small gambling win during last year's World Cup. Even Martin felt embarrassed about it and could only shift his gaze out the window, pretending to admire the street scenery. End of chapter. Chapter 35. Lewis's overture. After spending 16 days in Los Angeles, Martin returned to New York with Rachel. Priya didn't accompany them. She stayed behind at Facebook to familiarize herself with the company's internal legal processes and basic operations. With a briefcase full of contracts worth millions and the plane arriving in the morning, Martin didn't head back to his apartment. Instead, he took a taxi straight to the office. Who could say Martin wasn't a dedicated lawyer? The big boss of the firm, Jessica, warmly welcomed Martin into her office. After all, Martin had just earned the firm over $2 million and had become acquainted with a behemoth like Microsoft. Such treatment was only natural. After finally dealing with Jessica, Martin returned to his office to store the contracts and began tackling the accumulated workload from the past few days. Everything else was manageable, but the key issue was the commercial merger case Jessica had handed over before the trip to Los Angeles. The client had already arranged for an accounting firm to conduct due diligence and asset inventory on the opposing company. In a few days, they would enter the actual negotiation phase. While in Los Angeles, Martin had spoken with the client several times. Initially, the client had been critical of Martin's absence. However, upon learning that he was handling the Facebook-Microsoft financing deal and seeing the signing ceremony on the news, their attitude changed dramatically. It was such an exciting transaction. If I weren't busy with the merger, I'd have loved to attend your celebratory cocktail party. This demonstrated that a lawyer's status was entirely bolstered by having high-quality clients. As Martin was busy reviewing the asset details sent by the client, a crisp knock sounded on the glass door of his office. Looking up, Martin saw it was Louis Litt, one of the senior partners of the firm. There he stood outside the door, smiling broadly, his signature large front teeth on display, waving a bottle of whiskey in his left hand as a gesture. Rachel stood behind him, giving Martin a helpless expression. What was this guy up to? Suppressing his doubts, Martin got up to open the door for Louis. Congratulations. You're now a top-notch lawyer and a future senior partner. Louis immediately gave Martin an enthusiastic hug and congratulations, the first such intimate contact since Martin joined the firm. According to the firm's regulations, senior partners received an 8% share of all the firm's earnings. This meant that Martin's recent business trip had earned Louis nearly $200,000, even though, on the surface, Louis hadn't done much. Could it be that he came specifically to express gratitude for the earnings? Thank you, Louis. Martin's response wasn't entirely sincere, but the hug was sufficiently firm. Louis released him, glanced around Martin's slightly smaller office, and placed the whiskey on the coffee table in front of the sofa. "I heard about you, Martin." Louis's smile squeezed his face almost comically. "You've made an incredible deal. I dare say no young lawyer in the U.S. could have achieved what you've done. It's astonishing. Louis, you know that without your help, without the firm's brand effect and industry standing, I couldn't have done any of this. I'm very grateful for everything." Martin skillfully balanced youthful pride with mature demeanor. Aside from being a lawyer, he had also been the lead actor in his high school drama club and, during his sophomore summer, impulsively registered as an actor in the Hollywood Actors Guild for $25. Purely on a whim. Aside from gaining a few sweethearts as running buddies, Martin had also landed a minor role in a box office flop, a character with 2 lines. The movie never premiered in Boston, where Harvard was located, so Martin had to buy 100 DVDs from the distributor. After showing off to his classmates, he stored the rest in his apartment. It seemed that American celebrities and politicians had a penchant for cameo appearances in movies and TV shows. Like midline horizontal ellipsis. After some polite small talk, the two sat down on the sofa. Rachel entered at the right moment, placing 2 glasses and a bucket of ice on the coffee table. It was already 7 p.m., and drinking in the office wouldn't have any negative repercussions. Louis proactively opened the whiskey and poured Martin a glass. Victories always call for celebration with fine wine. Cheers. Cheers. Martin raised his glass in acknowledgement and downed it in one gulp. Feeling the subtle aftertaste, Martin furrowed his brow slightly and glanced at the amber liquid in his glass. "This was good stuff." Midline horizontal ellipsis. "Ever since you handled that competency test case, I've been telling Jessica that we chose the right person. As I expected, in just over 2 months you've created so many incredible miracles." Competency test. Martin recalled the rental dispute case he handled shortly after joining the firm. The supervising guy back then was Harvey. Seeing his stern, unsmiling face, I thought he was someone who didn't tolerate nonsense. Martin gently swirled the glass, allowing the liquor to mix with the ice, locking in the slowly evaporating aroma. "I just tried my best, and thankfully, the outcome matched my expectations." Harvey midline horizontal ellipsis. "He truly is a capable partner," Louis admitted. Though direct competitors, Louis wouldn't engage in backstabbing behavior in front of Martin. It would only lose him points. "However, our working styles are quite different. Diversity and teamwork are what make Pearson Hardman valuable, aren't they?" Seeing that his probing yielded no results, Martin was happy to keep things diplomatic. After circling around for a while, Louis noticed the young lawyer's slickness and casually revealed his thoughts as if making idle chatter. The firm might promote a senior partner after Christmas. "You know, Harvey and I are neck and neck in terms of client performance and seniority, which puts Jessica in a bit of a midline horizontal ellipsis predicament." Martin was momentarily stunned, unsure why Louis suddenly brought up the topic of partner promotions. Was he asking for Martin's support? But partner promotions were always decided by the big boss, Jessica. After all, most of the firm's business and its stellar reputation stemmed from her midline horizontal ellipsis. After a moment of silence, Martin said, "Though it might be inappropriate to say this, I sincerely hope you get what you wish for. You're a good person, Louis." Based on his impressions, this fat man, despite often clashing with the main characters Harvey Specter and Mike Ross, hadn't done anything unforgivable. In fact, sometimes he was even forced to lend a helping hand. He was quite a likable antagonist. This compliment wasn't entirely flattery. Hearing Martin's praise, Louis Litt's chubby face lit up even more. "Thank you, Martin. I really need support right now." After another toast, Louis finally loosened up. "By the way, Martin, I heard you gave the Facebook contract to your paralegal. She should have been promoted to junior lawyer by now, right?" He then looked up at the ceiling thoughtfully. "I remember her name is Priya Kothrapalli. She's a great girl, and being Asian avoids potential racial discrimination risks for the firm. You know, there were very few qualified Asian lawyers graduating from Harvard this year." Chapter 36, a new collaboration. Louis Litt was a junior partner at Pearson and Hartman, with certain administrative rights. For instance, he was responsible for managing all the new lawyers and paralegals in the firm. However, Martin himself was already overwhelmed with work, so he hadn't assigned Priya to handle the tedious and mundane tasks that other assistants were often stuck with. Instead, he directly placed her under his wing to assist with his own affairs. Now, thanks to Martin, Priya had risen dramatically. Many lawyers and their assistants were undoubtedly envious or even resentful behind her back. Could Louis be subtly expressing dissatisfaction? Martin quietly pondered this while maintaining a calm exterior. Priya is indeed an excellent girl. Moreover, her father is a highly respected doctor in New Delhi, India. Her brother, my good friend Rajesh, is a PhD in astrophysics from Imperial College London and is currently researching Neptune at Columbia University. Before Priya had fully demonstrated her legal abilities, Martin could only rely on her family background to bolster her standing. Louis caught the implication in Martin's words and quickly shook his head. "Martin, I'm not questioning you or Priya. After all, this deal belongs to you, and it's entirely your decision how to handle it. I'm merely suggesting there might be an opportunity for collaboration between us. After all, Priya is still inexperienced and may not yet be capable of handling the legal affairs of multiple medium to large companies, right?" "Multiple?" The office suddenly fell silent, save for the sound of Martin's right index finger repeatedly tapping against the glass. So Louis had set his sights on the high-quality enterprises behind Martin's mutual aid group members. Due to legal restrictions, after signing personal legal contracts with the mutual aid group members, Martin couldn't take on key legal roles in their associated companies. This was why Priya had been able to leap into the role of Facebook's chief legal counsel as a junior lawyer. Louis was right. Priya was too young and inexperienced. Handling Facebook's legal affairs was already a stretch, and Martin estimated she'd need another 2 years of mentorship before he could fully let go. If another company's critical legal position were to emerge now, Martin truly lacked the manpower to cover it. It must be said, Louis Litt's timing for extending an olive branch was impeccable. The essence of collaboration was mutual benefit. Martin was short on people to handle the legal matters of those internet companies, while Louis needed better performance and visibility to secure his promotion to senior partner. From a purely interest-driven perspective, the two were a match made in heaven. However, the founders of the mutual aid group and the enterprises behind them formed the foundation of Martin's legal career. How far and high Martin could rise depended largely on the future development of these individuals and companies. While earning the trust of the founders, Martin also hoped to maintain control over corporate legal matters, ensuring he wouldn't have to worry about internal betrayals when dealing with external issues. According to the original plan, Martin would gradually recruit suitable novice lawyers, continue expanding his influence within those companies, and hand over responsibilities to the newcomers once they were ready, at least ensuring no betrayal for the next decade. Even if betrayal occurred, Martin had prepared 9 ways to deal with those betrayals. But Lewis had clearly identified Martin's current weakness, a lack of manpower, and directly seized the opportunity, disregarding his status as a senior partner to extend goodwill. This combination of cunning and sincerity was impossible for Martin to refuse. Everyone knew that the reason Facebook's board allowed an assistant lawyer to serve as the company's chief legal counsel wasn't just because of Martin's prior relationship with them but also because of the prestige of Pearson and Hardman. Having enjoyed the shade of the big tree, it was only fair to water it occasionally. Midline horizontal ellipsis. Martin pondered for a long time before finally looking up at Lewis, who was feigning calmness. "You know, clients trust me enough to entrust me with their personal legal affairs. I must ensure I don't betray that precious trust." Lewis nodded in agreement. "Of course, that's the foundation of our profession." Martin shrugged. "My clients sacrificed their rest and dating time, pouring their passion into creating these forward-looking companies. They want to reap the joy and satisfaction of success, not face deception and betrayal from the company or the board. As their legal counsel, I must preemptively identify and eliminate these potential risks." Lewis instantly understood. It was a refusal to relinquish control. At this point, Lewis didn't care about control anymore. He simply wanted a heavyweight client as leverage during this critical period of his bid for senior partnership. Lewis hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Although the interests of the board and the founders sometimes don't align completely, I believe the founders who lead the company to success are more trustworthy on key issues. I hope you'll always remember today's answer." Martin smiled and raised his glass. "To a pleasant collaboration." Lewis realized the deal was sealed. His previously tense body slowly relaxed, and he raised his glass to clink with Martin's. After finishing the whiskey, Lewis didn't linger. After congratulating Martin once more on securing Facebook, he left feeling much lighter. Back in his office, Lewis sat down and noticed a new text message on his phone, labeled Martin Scott. Condé Nast Information Technology Company, main website, Reddit, founder, Steve Huffman. Remember to book a nice restaurant for Thursday evening. P.S. Steve likes Canadian ice wine. Lewis's eyes lit up, and he immediately opened his computer to start preparing. Meanwhile, Rachel walked into Martin's office to clean up the remnants on the coffee table. Martin sat back at his desk, resting his head on his right hand, openly admiring the exaggerated curves of his secretary as she bent over. "You said you didn't trust Lewis. Why are you willing to collaborate with him now?" Rachel suddenly turned around to meet Martin's somewhat mischievous gaze. "Mutual benefit is the only shortcut to success." Martin showed no sign of embarrassment. "Lewis gave me his promise, and I'm willing to temporarily trust him." "I suddenly see a very naive side of you." Rachel picked up the glasses and ice bucket. "Honestly, I thought you'd support Harvey, given that you know his secret and can ensure he won't betray you." "You mean Mike Ross, the guy who never attended Harvard Law School but got into the firm?" Martin chuckled and shook his head. "If Harvey thought Mike would be trouble, he wouldn't have hired him in the first place." "Whatever works." Rachel shrugged indifferently. But I still have to remind you that from the moment you agreed to collaborate with Lewis, everyone will think you're on his side, including Harvey and Jessica. That's just gossip among secretaries. Martin stood up and stretched lazily. Harvey is too proud. Even if he knows about my collaboration with Lewis, he won't come to me. As for Jessica, she'll understand that my move is just a gesture of goodwill toward her. Just wait. The senior partner position will definitely go to Harvey. Lewis doesn't stand a chance. Rachel stopped in her tracks and turned back, surprised. Why? Martin made an exaggerated helpless gesture. It's a world that judges by appearances, and Harvey is way more handsome than Lewis. End of chapter. Chapter 37, The Meaning of a Tie, Leonard. You incredible beast! A scream that couldn't be contained instantly startled Martin, who had just finished work and was dragging his suitcase to open the apartment door. What the hell? Reacting instinctively, Martin placed his suitcase at the entrance and tiptoed through the living room, slowly approaching Leonard's room. A flamboyant red tie hung proudly on the doorknob, seemingly announcing something. From inside the room came continuous screams and roars that were somewhat inappropriate for young ears. It was hard to imagine that the usually harmless Leonard could be so wild in bed. Martin smirked. Could it be Penny? No, Penny's voice would have been more pleasant. Just then, light footsteps sounded behind him. Martin turned around to see Penny and Sheldon entering. Seeing the two of them about to excitedly call him out, Martin quickly raised his index finger to his lips. Shh. Then he pointed at Leonard's door. Penny also heard the sounds from inside the room and immediately understood, shrinking her neck slightly. Sheldon remained as clueless as ever. The three quietly exited the apartment and closed the door. Penny spoke up first. Martin, I'm glad you're back. Everything went well? Yes. Martin smiled. Penny, you look really good. Did you have a glow-up while I was away? Then, noticing Sheldon standing awkwardly nearby, unsure where to put his hands, Martin grinned mischievously and pulled him into a hug. No need to say more, Sheldon. You must be very happy to see me back. Don't be shy, let Uncle Scott give you a warm welcome. No matter where, taking advantage of someone in terms of seniority is always a delightful thing. Sheldon, with ultimate germophobia, never liked physical contact, not even with childhood friends. But being 26, he couldn't outright reject like he did when he was a child, so he stood stiffly in place, being passive in the forced hug. Uncle, asked Penny, why are you calling yourself Uncle? Didn't you just grow up with Sheldon? Or is there some unknown family relationship between you two? Penny's question didn't rescue the uncomfortable Sheldon. Although Martin released him, he immediately turned and draped his arm over Sheldon's shoulder, both facing Penny. Okay. I get it. Penny looked back and forth between the two men, instantly understanding. Martin wore a well-fitted bespoke suit, while Sheldon sported a t-shirt from his favorite movie. Martin's smile was natural and comfortable, making people feel at ease. Sheldon fidgeted nervously, unsure where to look. Most importantly, Martin was extremely handsome. Saying he was a movie actor wouldn't feel out of place. As for Sheldon, although not unattractive, his large eyes and thin, lanky body always made people think he had alien genes. To be honest, I still can't believe you two grew up as friends in the same area. Penny's expression was indescribable. After some small talk, Penny straightforwardly invited Martin along with Sheldon to rest in her apartment. Inside the room, Martin took off his suit jacket, loosened his tie, unbuttoned 3 buttons of his shirt, and rolled up his sleeves. Okay. Can someone tell me what's going on with Leonard? Martin neatly placed his jacket and tie on the sofa and turned to ask, only to catch Penny daydreaming and water falling on the floor. He couldn't help but shake his head. Hey! Penny, wake up! Penny finally snapped out of it, hurriedly putting down the water bottle and grabbing a cloth to wipe the counter and floor haphazardly. Sheldon, who had been standing at the door criticizing the room's terrible hygiene, turned to look at the commotion and immediately felt this scene was very familiar. As a friend of both, Sheldon decided to do something to ease the somewhat strange atmosphere. Penny, believe me, you're not the first woman who wants to have a more intimate relationship with Martin, so there's no need to feel embarrassed. In fact, since 5th grade, many women have exhibited various uncontrollable strange behaviors in front of Martin. For a time, I thought Martin had Vulcan blood and could control others' minds with brain waves, which is one reason I accepted him as a friend. Many women often tried to approach Martin through me, making me long for the time I spent as a visiting scholar in Europe at 14. It was the most peaceful period of my life. Martin and Penny simultaneously turned to glare at Sheldon. Shut up. Sheldon obediently closed his mouth, but his stubborn gaze indicated he didn't think he said or did anything wrong. Martin shook his head helplessly and turned to Penny. Penny, can you tell me now who the woman in Leonard's room is? Penny innocently shook her head. I have no idea. Sheldon suddenly asked for my help and talked about some language stuff. Sheldon. Martin had no choice but to turn to Sheldon again. All right, you can speak now. Sheldon sighed in relief. When I returned, I found Leonard's door closed and a tie hung on the doorknob. I wasn't sure if this was Leonard sending me a distress signal or some other sign, so I sought Penny's help regarding semiotics. Sheldon, you went to college. How could you not know the meaning of a tie? Penny looked incredulous. Martin shook his head with a bitter smile. Penny, Sheldon was only 11 when he went to college. Oh. Penny's expressions were always so vivid. Sheldon, a tie hanging on the doorknob only means 2 things. Either he and a girl are having sex inside and don't want to be disturbed, or his hanger was stolen, and he has nowhere to hang the tie. Sheldon thought seriously for a while before realizing, oh, you mean a thief broke into our apartment and stole Leonard's hanger? Why didn't you think Leonard is in there with a woman? Spoke Penny, finding Sheldon's train of thought strange again. Sheldon replied confidently, as far as I know, Leonard has only one romantic relationship lasting 27 days in his lifetime, but he has been burglarized at least 8 times. Hence, statistically speaking, I can only assume the possibility of the hanger being stolen. End of chapter. Chapter 38, Crown Off. Champagne on. Although Penny warmly invited them to stay the night at her apartment, Martin, understanding it as mere courtesy, declined politely. There was no way around it. Aside from the bed, Penny's apartment only had a 2-seater sofa that could barely fit his legs. And add on top Sheldon, who likely won't sleep anywhere except his bed without probably some kind of ridiculous background and hygiene check and whatnot. All that didn't stop Martin from wondering if had chosen to stay tonight, he would have been caught in an endless, ambiguous situation where every glance exchanged with Penny would carry countless thoughts. He'd also have to endure Leonard's resentful stares for at least a year. Why bother? After leaving the apartment, Martin went to a well-known bar on Manhattan's Commercial Street. A woman approached Martin, who was sitting alone, 2 glasses of champagne held delicately in her hands. "Excuse me, she said, her tone dripping with playful confidence, but I couldn't help noticing you've been nursing that same drink for 20 minutes. Either you're trying to ration your tab midline horizontal ellipsis or you're waiting for someone far less interesting than me. Martin smirked, raising an eyebrow. And here I thought my brooding was working in my favor. Clearly, I need to step up my game if you're already calling me out. A glass of champagne was handed to him by Blair. Consider this a peace offering, and maybe a test. If you can keep up with me, we might just have something worth talking about. Martin took the glass, clinking it against hers. A challenge? From someone who looks like she knows exactly what she wants. Dangerous territory, Miss Midline Horizontal Ellipsis, Blair Waldorf, she replied, leaning slightly closer. But let's not get too formal yet, you haven't earned the right to use my last name. Martin chuckled softly. Fair enough. So tell me, Blair Waldorf, why are you wasting your time on a stranger at a bar when you could clearly be ruling the world instead? Oh, don't flatter yourself, Blair shot back, sipping her champagne. I'm not wasting time, I'm investing it. Besides, Manhattan has its share of kings, but very few Princes Charming. Care to prove me wrong? Martin tilted his head, intrigued. Princes Charming, huh? Sounds like you've had some experience with royalty gone bad. Blair hesitated for a fraction of a second, her smile faltering briefly before snapping back into place. Let's just say I spent the last year learning that fairy tales don't exist, and neither do happy endings. Turns out, even princesses have expiration dates. Martin raised an eyebrow. Expiration dates? Blair shrugged lightly, swirling her champagne. Graduation caps go on, tiaras come off. Some people grow up faster than others. After some playful banter at the bar, Blair glanced at her watch and stood, gesturing subtly toward the door. Well, Mr. Broody and mysterious, it seems my night is winding down. Unless, of course, you'd care to join me for a change of scenery? Martin stood slowly, matching her tone. Change of scenery? That sounds suspiciously like an invitation. Who said anything about invitations? Blair tilted her head, feigning innocence. I simply mentioned a location shift. Whether you follow is entirely up to you. A grin spread across Martin's face as he fell into step beside her. Lead the way, then. Though I should warn you, I'm not great at following directions. Don't worry, Blair replied, glancing back over her shoulder. I prefer men who take initiative midline horizontal ellipsis within reason. The pair moved through the crowded bar, their steps synchronized, until they reached the hotel lobby. The transition from the noisy bar to the quiet elegance of the lobby was seamless, the air thick with unspoken anticipation. Inside the elevator, Blair pressed the button for her floor and leaned casually against the railing. Silence stretched momentarily before Martin broke it. So, Blair Waldorf, he began, his voice low and teasing, do all your late-night adventures end this dramatically? Blair played with the edge of her clutch, smiling faintly. Only the ones worth remembering. What about you? Do you usually tag along with strangers so easily? Martin stepped closer, lowering his voice. Depends on the company. Some people make risks feel midline horizontal ellipsis worthwhile. Blair met his gaze, her smile sharpening. Careful. Compliments won't get you everywhere, though they might get you further than most. When the elevator dinged and the doors slid open, Blair stepped out first, pausing to glance back at him expectantly. At the door, Blair pulled the keycard from her purse, turning it over in her fingers. Funny thing about hotels, they always seem to bring out the best stories. Martin stood close now, his voice low. Or the worst secrets. Which one are we aiming for tonight? Blair unlocked the door, pushing it open slightly before looking up at him. That depends on whether you're brave enough to find out. Martin paused in the doorway, meeting her eyes. Bravery isn't the issue. It's knowing when to stop teasing and start delivering. By Blair, a smirk was given, and a gesture into the room was made. Then, by all means midline horizontal ellipsis, she stepped backward, holding the door open. Deliver. He followed her in, and the door clicked shut behind them. Sunlight filtered through the heavy hotel curtains, casting soft golden streaks across the room. The faint hum of Manhattan traffic drifted in from outside. Blair stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open as she took in her surroundings. For a moment, she lay still, letting the events of the previous night wash over her: champagne, flirtation, elevators, and whispered promises. With practiced ease, she slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb the sleeping figure beside her. She padded silently across the plush carpet, gathering her clothes from where they'd been discarded the night before. Her movements were deliberate, efficient, a queen reclaiming her composure. Once dressed, she paused in front of the mirror near the dresser, smoothing her hair and adjusting her outfit until she looked every bit the poised Upper East Side princess she was known to be. Satisfied with her reflection, she turned her attention to the desk by the window, picking up a pen and a piece of hotel stationery. Her handwriting was neat, elegant, as always, a perfect match for the sharpness of her words. Dear stranger, thanks for the distraction, it was exactly what I needed. Don't worry about finding me, queens don't look back. She folded the note crisply and placed it on the pillow beside him, ensuring it caught the light just enough to be noticed. A small smirk played at the corners of her lips as she stepped back to survey the scene. With one last glance at Martin, his face relaxed in sleep, unaware of her departure, she grabbed her clutch and headed for the door. As she pulled it shut behind her, the soft click echoed faintly in the quiet room, sealing the end of their brief encounter. End of chapter. Chapter 39. Cute little flower tattoo. The sunlight streaming through the curtains grew brighter, eventually rousing Martin from sleep. He blinked awake, disoriented for a moment before the memories of the previous night began to resurface: champagne, flirtation, an elevator ride, and the electric tension that had carried them into this very room. As he reached for the pillow beside him, his fingers brushed against something crisp, a folded piece of hotel stationery. Picking it up, he unfolded the note and read Blair's parting words: Dear stranger, thanks for the distraction, it was exactly what I needed. Don't worry about finding me, queens don't look back. A slow smile spread across his face as he took in the sharp wit and confident tone of the message. Leaning back against the headboard, Martin let his thoughts drift. She'd been so poised, so self-assured last night, far more mature than most women he'd encountered in similar situations. And yet, there had been something almost midline horizontal ellipsis youthful about her, too. The way she'd spoken about crowns slipping and tiaras coming off hinted at a recent transition, a shedding of one identity for another. He replayed fragments of their conversation in his mind, the casual mention of graduation caps, her cryptic remark about growing up faster than others. At the time, he hadn't thought much of it, chalking it up to poetic flair. But now, alone in the quiet of the morning, those details nagged at him. Graduation, he murmured aloud, connecting the dots. She's 18. 19 at the most. For a brief moment, unease prickled at the edges of his thoughts. 18 wasn't illegal, of course, but it felt young, too young for the world weariness she'd projected, too close to the line between innocence and experience. Had he unwittingly stepped into territory better left untouched? He considered this carefully, reasoning it out step by step. Blair hadn't acted like someone unsure of herself or her choices. She'd been deliberate, confident, every word calculated with precision. Someone younger than 18 wouldn't have carried themselves with such poise, or managed to keep up with him so effortlessly. Besides, Manhattan's elite didn't let just anyone into their world. Martin shook his head slightly. Whether 19 or 18. She was no naive teenager caught up in something beyond her depth. Blair had made it abundantly clear that last night was a fleeting moment, a distraction, as she'd called it, and nothing more. She'd walked away on her terms, leaving behind a note that radiated self-assurance. That alone spoke volumes about her maturity. Still, as he got dressed and prepared to leave the hotel room, Martin couldn't shake the feeling that Blair Waldorf was far more complicated than she'd let on. Martin checked out and returned to the bar from the previous night. He hopped into the Porsche 911 he had left there after drinking and drove back to the apartment. After being away on a business trip for so long, taking a day off wasn't unreasonable, right? Walking up to the 4th floor and opening the apartment door, Martin saw a girl with slightly messy hair, wearing glasses, a Gap hoodie, jeans, sneakers, and a backpack exiting. "Hey, I remember you. You're Leslie Winkle, right?" Martin greeted her with a smile and continued, "Colleagues with Sheldon and Leonard." Clearly, the girl also recognized Martin somehow. "Hi. Yes, though I doubt Sheldon will agree with that characterization." Martin made an expression of helplessness. "Well, from what I have heard about you from him, I guess not," she replied with a smile on her face. "That bad, huh?" Martin replied helplessly, "Well, you know how Sheldon is, so what brought you to our humble abode?" "Yes, I am well aware of him," replied Leslie, "just discussing some things with Leonard." At this moment, Leonard finally spoke up. "Leslie, should I to drop you off somewhere?" "No, it's okay. I am in kind of hurry, I have a lab booked for an experiment." Leslie spoke up suddenly as if she just remembered something important and left hurriedly. Closing the door, Martin walked over to sit at the kitchen table, teasingly looking at Leonard. "So how was it?" Leonard shook his head gloomily. "Everything was fine until you showed up." "Sorry, I just came back to get my suit cleaned and didn't expect to bump into her." Martin raised his hands to show his innocence. "By the way, I noticed that since Penny moved next door, your nightlife seems to have gotten much more interesting. Last time it was Priya, this time Leslie. Who will it be next?" "Come on." Leonard became even more frustrated, took a freshly brewed cup of coffee and sat on the sofa. "I want a stable relationship, but they only want someone to help them with their physical needs," and spoke in a disappointing voice. "That's not what I want." Martin chuckled, shaking his head, and looked at Leonard's attire disdainfully. "If you listened to me and didn't wear those damn white cotton socks to bed, you'd get what you want." Leonard jumped up. "Socks give me a sense of security. But they won't bring you a hot girlfriend." Martin also sat on the sofa, spreading his hands and with an amusing smile on his face spoke up. "Listen, only kids sleep with socks on because after secretly playing Dungeons and Dragons behind their parents' backs, they always worry about dragons biting off their little feet while they sleep." Just then, Sheldon emerged from his room wearing a bathrobe, greeted everyone with a "good morning," and headed to the kitchen. Sheldon sleeps with socks on too. Leonard pointed at Sheldon's feet and shouted. Martin gave him a "you're hopeless" look. And do you think Sheldon is mature? Because Martin had returned after a half-month business trip, all four nerdy scientists and Penny gathered at the apartment for dinner. Okay, why don't we talk about some fun things that happened during the half-month I was gone? For instance, Leonard slept with Leslie last night. Wow! Everyone turned to look at Leonard, who was visibly embarrassed. She made the first move. Leonard forced a defense, then quickly shifted to gossip. Okay, Penny got back together with her ex-boyfriend, the guy who stripped us naked. You mean Kurt? Martin recalled the 6'3", 1.91 meters, muscular guy who cried after being scared by him. Well, news flash, we've broken up. Penny stabbed at the food in her box with her fork and spoon, as if stabbing her ex-boyfriend. He's a jerk. What did he do now? Martin frowned. Alright, here's what happened. Penny's fork and spoon pressed harder. That jerk wrote details about our sex life in his blog, and now the whole world knows I have a cute little flower tattoo on my lower back. Whoosh, a takeout box suddenly appeared midair and landed steadily on the dining table. Everyone around the coffee table turned to see Howard teleporting to the computer on the other side of the living room, frantically searching and switching through different blog sites. End of chapter. Chapter 40. Thursday dinner. Penny's issue was actually quite easy to resolve. Her ex-boyfriend had at least already committed the offenses of unauthorized use of likeness and defamation, which were considered serious crimes in the U.S. Just think about Disney. However, when Martin once again stood before that muscle-bound man who couldn't even mentally calculate 37 times 2, the man immediately caved. Not only did he delete the blog right away, but he also voluntarily returned the money Penny had lent him. It seemed that last punch had left a deep impression on him. After confirming that Penny didn't want to pursue legal action further, Martin didn't push her. He gave the muscle man a meaningful smile and left. At 8 p.m. on Thursday, Martin ended his work early and arrived at a nice French restaurant in the Upper East Side as agreed. As soon as he walked into the restaurant, Martin saw the burly Louis Litt standing up from a chair by the window and waving at him. Next to him was one of Martin's mutual aid group members, Steve Huffman, the founder of Reddit News. Steve was a student at the University of Virginia. The two met during a trip and became good friends. Later, Martin learned that Steve had started a news website at school and straightforwardly invited him to join the mutual aid group. A year later, with Martin's wildly creative promotional strategies, Reddit's traffic skyrocketed from tens of thousands to nearly 100 million clicks. It was now the third most visited news site in the U.S., after Yahoo and Murdoch's News Corporation. Earlier this year, Steve Hoffman, a well-known angel investor from Silicon Valley whose name was almost identical, valued Reddit at $1.5 billion. Steve, you look great. Martin walked over and hugged Steve. Looks like you found a new girlfriend recently. Don't expect me to bring her to meet you. Steve laughed. I read the news. Mark's deal went very smoothly with your help. Martin waved his hand. Not just Mark, do you know Clark Hunt? He will officially join Hope next month under his personal name. Steve looked at Martin in pleasant surprise. Are you sure? For these college students who started businesses in the new century, Microsoft was an immovable giant. They both admired its success and felt some fear and resentment toward it. After all, Microsoft's style of doing business in recent years had been rather domineering. But now, Clark Hunt, a director of Microsoft and chairman of the Investment Strategy Committee, was joining them. This meant that the giant was at least not against them. Who wouldn't fear such a powerful and dominant company? Amidst the joy, Steve glanced at Lewis beside him and whispered in Martin's ear. "Will Mr. Hunt join the mutual aid group?" Martin chuckled and shook his head. "You can't expect a man close to 70 to go to Hawaii with us to watch bikini girls." Martin hadn't kept the mutual aid group particularly secret, but he hadn't advertised it either. Why would these guys, deeply influenced by Freemason conspiracy theories, love to play mysterious? If it weren't for Martin stopping them, this group would have regularly worn hooded robes, held white candles, and secretly gathered in an ancient castle or stone house. It was said that the scientifically minded Illuminati used to hold meetings like this in medieval times when persecuted by the church. What? You haven't heard of the Illuminati? Go back and flip through your high school physics and history textbooks. Almost 80% of the European scientists and artists mentioned are said to be members of the Illuminati. Or watch the movie Angels and Demons. Although the plot is somewhat bizarre and conspiratorial, it perfectly described the conspiracy as seen by public. After chatting with his good friend for a while, Martin didn't forget the senior partner waiting nearby. Martin smiled. "Steve, this is Lewis Litt, a partner at our firm and also my boss." Then, turning to Lewis, he said, "Steve Huffman, one of the founders of Reddit and my good friend." Lewis once again flashed his signature big buck teeth. "Thank you, Martin. We just arrived not long ago." After the introductions, the three sat down at the dining table. After the two ordered their meals, Martin picked up the menu and said while looking at it, "Tom Brady is absolutely crazy this year. Did you watch last weekend's game? He threw 4 touchdown passes." "I watched it, but Peyton Manning also performed well." Steve immediately countered, not giving Martin any face. "And Eli Manning too. The Giants already have 8 wins. This is Eli Manning's 4th season, and he has consistently performed well, not losing out to his brother." Lewis Litt also chimed in appropriately. "Martin, as a New York lawyer, you should support your own team." After ordering his meal, Martin shook his head. "Of course I support the Giants, but I just feel that Brady is in exceptional form this year. Did you notice the slow-motion replays? His passing accuracy is so strong, it's like bullets." The three were discussing the quarterbacks of famous teams in the NFL, National Football League. Americans like to chat about unrelated topics before getting down to business. Like the 4 nerds in the apartment, they would talk about the latest breakthroughs in physics or whether Season 5 of Star Trek was good or bad. Facing Steve and Lewis, Martin could only choose the hottest Maas topic as an opener. Who is the top quarterback of the NFL this year? Is it Tom Brady of the New England Patriots or Peyton Manning of the Indianapolis Colts? As for Eli Manning of the New York Giants, he's still a bit green compared to his brother. The three continued chatting while eating, moving from football to Britney Spears, who had been making headlines recently. Halfway through the meal, under Lewis's frequent glances, Martin finally brought up the main topic. "Steve, do you remember talking to me about wanting to start Series B funding after Christmas?" Steve Huffman smiled and nodded. "Of course. Do you have any recommended investment firms?" "Not yet. After Mr. Hunt joins the foundation, he'll talk to you. He should be a good lead investor." I remember Reddit's legal department currently only has 2 full-time corporate lawyers. Reddit was different from Facebook. Its growth wasn't as rapid, and with fewer than 40 employees, it naturally couldn't build a complete legal department like Facebook. Hearing this, Steve immediately realized. Martin, do you want to take it over? Isn't Series B coming up soon? 2 corporate lawyers won't be able to handle the situation. Martin said matter-of-factly, Lewis and I came to see you specifically for this. He's a partner at the firm with excellent experience and reputation. I'd feel more at ease if he helps you. Lewis inwardly sighed in relief. Just as he was about to habitually recommend himself, he noticed Steve Huffman across the table raising his glass with a smile. Lewis, do you have time to visit the company soon? We can discuss the details of the advisory contract. That's it. Surprised, Lewis didn't forget to raise his glass. Anytime. Steve, I hope we'll have a great start. End of chapter. Chapter 41. A bizarre party. Since he planned to drink in the evening, Martin didn't drive his own Porsche but borrowed a luxurious Lincoln that another partner, Harvey Specter, had rented long-term. Of course, the $700 rental fee for the car and driver for the night would be paid by Martin himself. After enjoying a decent French dinner, Lewis invited the 2 of them to a famous bar for the next leg of the evening. Steve didn't care either way. Martin initially thought about joining in, but at that moment, he received a text message. Martin frowned as he read it over and over again, taking a while to react. He then looked up at Lewis and said, "Sorry, Steve and I have a new engagement." Lewis wasn't in a rush. After chatting casually for a bit, he got into his car and left. Martin pushed Steve into the Lincoln. "Come on, let me show you a nostalgic 90s themed party with horses." 90s? Horses? Steve looked bewildered. What on earth is this? Martin got into the car, smiling. I don't know either, that's why we're going to check it out. An hour later, the Lincoln stopped outside the Williamsburg restaurant in Brooklyn. Steve Huffman got out of the car, looking at the hundreds of hippies dressed in bizarre outfits at the entrance of the restaurant and a live racehorse, and couldn't help but curse. Martin, where the hell have you brought me? Martin, who had just gotten out of the car, also saw this scene and slightly furrowed his brows. At least half a month ago, this was still a normal restaurant entrance. As for now, I have no idea. On the other side, Carolyn had already noticed a luxury car stopping at the entrance. She was worried it might be someone she knew from before she went bankrupt, but then she saw Martin, whom she hadn't seen in a long time, and a man she didn't recognize getting out. Martin. What are you doing here? Martin turned toward the voice and saw Carolyn holding the reins of a purebred champion horse named Chestnut Treasure, looking at him in surprise. Carolyn, that's my line. Martin smiled, went forward to hug Carolyn, and pointed to Steve beside him. This is my friend, Steve Huffman. Steve, this is my sweetheart Carolyn. Don't even think about making a move on her. Carolyn rolled her eyes. Martin, remember you don't have the right to say that last part until you ask me out. Steve greeted Carolyn with a smile. What's going on here? Martin looked around and patted the cheek of the racehorse. They even brought out Chestnut Treasure. Carolyn was comfortable enough not to hide anything from Martin. As you can see, it's an absolutely fantastic party. And I'm the genius behind it. She then curiously asked, how did you know there was an event here tonight? A client invited me. Martin took out his phone and showed Carolyn a text message titled, Dancing with the 90s and Horses. The sender of the text was Leigh. Okay, I hope he didn't send this message to the NYPD. Carolyn shook her head in exasperation, then gave a signal to those around her. So, do you want to join? Martin and Steve exchanged a glance and laughed, each pulling out $100 bill and handing it to Carolyn. Friends were friends, but money was money. Martin didn't expect Carolyn to waive his entry fee because of their relationship. Instead, Carolyn pulled out a stack of $20 bills from her pocket, tied them with a rubber band, and handed them to Martin. That's another $1,000. Can you take it inside and lock it in Leigh's safe? To avoid some guy suddenly appearing in a minute and shoving something that might be a gun or who knows what into my mouth. No problem, I'll write you a check later. Martin weighed it in his hand and casually tossed it to the luxury car driver. Carol, tonight's car fare. And don't tell Harvey, the driver, called Carol, tucked the money into his inner coat pocket and nodded with a smile. This guy was a professional bodyguard with a legal concealed carry permit in New York State. Driving was just his part-time job when he didn't have escort duties. Just then, Max Black came out of the restaurant, saw the situation, and shouted, Martin, you actually came back alive from Versailles? Versailles was the name of a street in downtown Los Angeles and the holy land for filming adult movies in America. You could see thousands of action stars dressed in revealing outfits there, with cup sizes starting at E, and lips more exaggerated than Angelina Jolie's. Martin gave Max a hug. Max, your beauty saved me from the land of pleasure. He then introduced Steve to her. Wait, why was Steve looking at Max with sparkling eyes? After some colorful small talk, Martin finally learned how this bizarre party came about. Carolyn wants to help me pay off my student loans, Leigh wants to lose his first time tonight, and we even have a horse. Is there anything cooler than riding a horse at a party? Martin peeked over and saw Leigh passionately kissing a woman taller than him by a head. He nodded. Looks like he has a chance tonight. He then curiously looked at Max. I might be a bit rude to ask, but Max, you actually went to college? Student loans were only available to college students. Max crossed her arms and made a hip-hop gesture. Yo! Aren't I awesome? Whatever, judging by tonight's situation, you should be able to pay off the loan. Martin didn't care how Max, who hadn't graduated from high school, managed to get into college. After all, a high school diploma wasn't the only admission criterion for American universities. For instance, homeschooled students who had never attended school could get in as long as they passed university interviews and aptitude tests. And this wasn't rare. Harvard admitted 7 to 10% of its freshmen as so-called homeschooled students every year. Next, Max took over from Carolyn to lead the horse and continue charging. Steve volunteered to spend more time with the horse. Martin didn't say much and let him be. After letting Carolyn go about her business, Martin wandered around the restaurant with a beer in hand, refusing advances from 7 or 8 punk or grunge girls who wanted to chat him up. The reason was simple, these girls were too. Never mind, let's be polite. These girls weren't his type. Martin found this party a bit boring. It just had an extra horse, and if you wanted to ride it for a spin, you had to pay Carolyn an additional $25. He didn't understand why these hippies were so interested, lining up to take pictures with Chestnut Treasure to post on Facebook. The conflicted Earl behind the cash register was more interesting. "Earl, this is supposed to be your favorite kind of party. Why don't you look happy?" The old hip-hop era man with headphones immediately became indignant. "Do you know? This scene reminds me of the bars I used to frequent in the 90s, full of cool guys like me who were sexy and high. But now, there's just these bunch of pussies who only drink beers." Martin looked at the beer in his hand. His expression turned a bit strange. End of chapter. Chapter 42. Night talk. This chaotic party almost satisfied the needs of everyone in the restaurant. Carolyn earned over $10,000 in entrance fees, enough to pay off Max's 2-year college student loan. Lee finally managed to shed his virginity. However, judging by his indescribable expression and the red scratch marks on his back, his first time might not have been a pleasant memory. Oleg, the LSP, and a robust woman from Eastern Europe started their third round in the kitchen's cold storage. Max and Steve disappeared at midnight. Martin kept holding his beer, discussing with Earl whether not doing drugs meant being a weakling. This man, born in 1937, indeed had many fascinating life experiences, leaving Martin wide-eyed. For instance, in 1996, he helped a young man named Marshall Bruce Mathers III with the backing vocals for an album and even had a signed collector's edition CD. Don't know who that is? Have you heard of Eminem? Or his more widely known nickname, Slim Shady? This was a name that any hip-hop fan couldn't stay calm about upon hearing. No matter how many people criticized his music for its negative influence on teenagers, or whether it was his skin color that allowed him to rise unexpectedly in the black-dominated hip-hop scene, his passionate flow and rapping speed of nearly 100 words in 15 seconds were enough to command respect. Not just in this life, but one of Martin's top 3 favorite singers from his previous life was him. Upon learning that the unassuming Earl had such explosive collectibles, Martin, who had maintained a composed and rational persona outside, couldn't contain himself now. "Earl. You know what? I'd give everything I have to get it. Tell me what you want." "Anything." "Calm down, brother. Old Earl doesn't lack anything." Earl sat at the cash register, shaking his head. "I'm 70 already. Besides praying to God to let me die in my sleep instead of getting shot, my life has been without regret. Can't give you that right now, that's old Earl's precious memory. But when I'll amend my will, that signed CD will be yours, along with hundreds of sexy photos of black actresses from the 1960s. Those are all my cherished collections." Martin shook his head with a bitter smile. "Earl, compared to an album, I'd rather you live to be 200. Damn it. Do you want me to endure another 100 years of suffering? Life isn't that great, brother." Old Earl could talk endlessly once he started. After the party ended, Martin took Carolyn back to her apartment and, naturally, ended up sleeping together again. Still on Max's messy bed. This gave them a bit of forbidden pleasure, making their movements especially vigorous and passionate. More than an hour later, Carolyn fell asleep, or rather, passed out from exhaustion. Martin lay in bed resting for a full half-hour before he had the strength to get up and go to the living room for some water. Unexpectedly, as soon as he opened the door, he saw Max wearing an apron, busy making cakes in the kitchen. "Sorry, Max. I thought you wouldn't be back tonight." Martin felt a bit awkward because he was only wearing a pair of CK boxer briefs. Sheldon had once educated him from multiple perspectives like blood circulation and physiological development about the harm of tight underwear to male characteristics and repeatedly recommended his own style. Aside from the colorful SpongeBob prints, Martin couldn't help but think they resembled the styles worn by some old men. Because of that damn supply contract of yours, I had to rush back to this dump after enjoying myself to handle tomorrow's orders. While stirring the cake mix, Max sneered and glanced at a certain part of him. No wonder that slut keeps wanting to maintain a partnership with you. I must say, your little buddy is not at all little. Martin smirked and went back into the bedroom to put on his shirt and trousers. Returning to the living room, Martin poured himself some water and asked, "How was Steve?" "Not bad, except for being a bit passive," Max asked with a hint of disdain. "Do all you Manhattan elites prefer being on the bottom?" Martin quickly waved his hands. "I prefer taking the initiative. Carolyn can vouch for that." After exchanging some colorful greetings, Martin sat down on the sofa and watched Max's cake-making process. The cake mix was pre-prepared, just add water and different colored flavorings, stir evenly, pour into molds, bake for 30 minutes, then take them out and pipe various cream designs on top. 50 cupcake cakes were done like that. Feeling either empty or hungry after the workout, Martin got up and walked into the kitchen, picked up a chocolate-flavored one, and started eating while blowing on it to cool it down. Freshly baked cupcakes were hot, but their aroma was at its richest. "Your firm will only receive 149 cupcakes today." Max looked at Martin like a thief. "Remember to inform the admin after work so they don't shortchange me." Martin made a knowing expression and smiled, asking, "How do you feel?" "Martin, I really don't want to discuss any bed-related issues with my best friend's running buddy at 3 in the morning, especially since she's sleeping within 5 meters of us." Max's eyes became strange. "Can't you think of anything else besides those things?" Martin helplessly held his forehead. "I meant, how have you been lately? Feeling physically drained or mentally exhausted? After all, your rest time is too little. Poor people don't have the luxury to sleep in." Martin shook his head helplessly. "Is there anything you need help with?" "Everything's fine." Max also shook her head, putting another set of 50 cake molds into the oven. "You know, new oven, new business, earning an extra $300 a day. Nothing could be better than that." Martin frowned. "Have you ever thought about expanding your cake business further? Or taking a cake course to improve it a bit?" It was just a casual suggestion, but unexpectedly, Max suddenly turned around and shouted, "Are you the devil? I only get 4 hours of sleep every night, then deliver goods for you, take care of that skinny bitch's kids, and only get 3 hours of sleep by noon. And you still want to exploit me?" Martin innocently touched his nose. "If there's more business, I think you can completely quit that $50 a day nanny job." End of chapter. Chapter 43. The emotions of lawyers. After arriving in this world where TV dramas and reality intertwine, Martin had been struggling with how to face the characters from the plot. At first, he chose to remain a detached observer, neither interfering with the development of the story nor taking any proactive actions. However, when he learned that George Cooper, Sheldon's father who had taught him football, passed away from a heart attack, Martin felt extremely guilty. He knew George would die young but couldn't remember exactly when. He also couldn't follow him around 24/7. Looking at Sheldon, who had just returned from Europe for the funeral, his face filled with the same pain and helplessness as Mary and Missy, Martin felt an overwhelming sense of guilt, tormenting him like burning flames. From then on, he began trying to change the storyline. First, Martin used the small amounts of money he had earned over the years to fund Sheldon's older brother, George Jr., to open a tire shop, allowing George Jr. to stay in Texas to take care of Mary and Missy, who was still in high school. Then, he took Sheldon to an interview at Columbia University in New York. Because he knew that he would only stay in New York in the future, making it more convenient to help Sheldon. It was repayment for the 1/3 share of Lone Star beer that George secretly shared with him after high school. But, unexpectedly, 2 months later, Leonard appeared with a silly grin. The storyline God knows how had returned to its original track. Later, Martin met Carolyn and Max. Investing in Max and helping her was another attempt by Martin to change the storyline. He hoped to give this optimistic girl, who came from darkness but aspired for light, a chance. So far, things seemed fine, but who knew if the will of this world would pull the storyline back to its original position. Early the next morning, Martin brought 150 cupcakes, rode in the Lincoln car back to his apartment to change clothes, and then went to work at the firm. Unexpectedly, not long after arriving at the office, Harvey Specter showed up. Harvey actually found out so quickly after Martin introduced Steve to another senior partner, Louis Litt, last night? Wondered Martin. Seeing Rachel's teasing expression outside the glass door, Martin couldn't help but shake his head with a bitter smile. Just a few days ago, he had pretended to be a prophet in front of her, saying that Harvey was a proud person who would never come to him for a client, but now he was proven wrong so soon. To be honest, if working with Louis could still be somewhat acceptable, Martin would rather die than have any professional contact with Harvey. This guy had a history of meddling in company management. A month ago, after Harvey joined the firm, the founder of the first company he represented, McKernan Motors, which was famous for its F1 cars, died of a heart attack. The board followed normal procedures and appointed a new CEO. When Harvey met with this new CEO, he learned that the CEO planned to relocate its engine factory in Detroit overseas to reduce the company's operational and labor costs. This meant that more than 2,000 auto workers would immediately lose their jobs. Harvey thought this was detrimental to McKernan Motors as its engine and quality was what made McKernan Motors the McKernan Motors, so he found various loopholes in the company's personnel appointment regulations, brought in a new owner for $250 million and successfully ousted the new CEO, replacing him with a technical director who didn't know much about management. And this technical director came from that factory and definitely wouldn't consider relocation. So in the eyes of those 2,000 workers, Harvey was the righteous lawyer representing justice in legal dramas. But Martin didn't think so. If it were a time of steady economic growth and social stability, doing this wouldn't be a problem, and it might even align with political correctness. But what about the financial crisis that was highly likely to break out next year? In his previous life, Detroit became a ghost town during this storm. Relocating the factory overseas and getting rid of those auto workers who enjoyed high benefits was the only way for companies to survive. And McKernan, an automotive company with all its industries domestically, facing high labor and operational costs, was destined to go bankrupt. At that time, not only would the 2,000 auto workers in this factory still lose their jobs, but more than 10,000 other basic employees of McKernan would also be forced to leave. If the new owner doesn't add more money into it, which no chance in hell was gonna happen in a financial crisis, Affected by the broader environment, these people might not find new jobs and would be forced onto the streets due to inability to pay their mortgages. Now, does anyone still think Harvey is a good lawyer? Some might say, Harvey isn't a time traveler. How could he predict events 2 years ahead? Martin wasn't mocking or criticizing Harvey with his foreknowledge, but the way Harvey handled the matter itself violated the principles a lawyer should uphold. A lawyer must never get emotionally attached with their clients. Because then they start behaving irrationally and lose the sight of broader picture. Now, if instead of being so emotionally attached to it Harvey would have paused and looked at the overall conditions of market, he might not be able to predict financial crisis, but he could definitely hear the rumors of something big coming. But he was so attached to his first client or the company he helped grew that he lost eye from the ball in this situation. This is one of the common flaw among protagonists in almost all legal dramas. They get too emotional for those who stood by their side. Martin really wanted to see if Harvey could maintain his ever calm and confident smile when he realized that his actions 2 years ago led to McKinnon Automotive's inability to withstand the financial crisis, or worse, ultimately resulting in bankruptcy and liquidation, forcing over 10,000 basic employees onto the streets. Some people often say, helping good people with lawsuits makes you a conscientious lawyer, while helping bad people or the rich makes you a black-hearted lawyer. Is there such a clear distinction between right and wrong in the world? End of chapter. Chapter 44. Harvey's troubles. 6 months after joining the firm, Martin was seen by many as a younger version of Harvey Specter. They were both handsome, refined, fashion-conscious, loved sports and music, and even their manner of speaking and behavior were similar. Their private relationship was decent. After all, during the recruitment of an assistant, Martin had helped Harvey conceal Mike Ross's inadequate educational background from the firm. This gave them a shared secret. However, Martin knew that he and Harvey were entirely different types of people. Martin preferred to resolve all issues within the confines of the rules. He might have some moral flaws, but legally, he was impeccable. Harvey, on the other hand, was a bit emotional. To help his former teacher, he concealed the teacher's act of hiding evidence in court from the district attorney, which almost landed him in serious trouble. Private interactions aside, Martin was even willing to be a kindred spirit with him. After all, his ex-girlfriend was undeniably stunning. But when it came to business midline horizontal ellipsis, just as Martin was racking his brain on how to refuse Harvey, Harvey spoke up first. "Martin, I need you to do me a favor." So direct? Not even starting with discussing how good Donna, his secretary, is at crying on cue. Martin hesitated before responding. "Harvey, I know that my collaboration with Lewis bothers you." Midline horizontal ellipsis, Lewis? Harvey raised an eyebrow, full of arrogance. "Do you think I'd stoop so low as to shamelessly ask you for clients like him?" Martin looked up in surprise. "Then what else could it be?" "I thought you were the person in this firm who understood me the most, Martin." Harvey shook his head, seemingly disappointed. Martin gritted his teeth. "To be honest, a few days ago, I made a bet with Rachel. I said you wouldn't come to me because of my collaboration with Lewis." "What was the bet?" Harvey's expression instantly turned curious. Martin shook his head. "No stakes. After all, you're bound to become a senior partner anyway. I don't want Rachel's barely maintained dignified life to completely collapse." "Barely maintained? Did she tell you that?" Harvey's expression turned strange. "Don't you know about Rachel's family background? Her last name is Zane." Martin smirked. Her father, Dr. Zane, has a Juris Doctor from the University of Pennsylvania and founded his own firm, earning nearly $20 million in commissions annually. Her mother is an executive director of a multinational company midline horizontal ellipsis, a rich girl pursuing personal freedom by pretending to be a small secretary at a big company, maybe even falling in love with a poor guy someday, like your assistant lawyer who never went to law school. It's such a cliché Hollywood popcorn plot. Harvey's previously tense face cracked into a smile, and he couldn't help but glance back at Rachel, who was busy outside the office. I originally thought you liked her. Martin shook his head. Sleeping with a future business partner is the riskiest form of emotional investment. After all, you never know when you'll suddenly start arguing, go through a cold war, or break up, and then she'll secretly transfer away your assets and company. This was the fundamental reason Martin hadn't slept with Priya earlier. Did he really think that being reborn meant he could collect every woman he met? Could he use his unmatched abilities and endless wealth to make every woman fall madly in love with him? Wake up. The Dark Ages fell long ago. Harvey shook his head. No wonder they've given you the nickname, venture capital lawyer. Really? That's a thing. Martin scratched his head in confusion, planning to ask Rachel once Harvey left. After all, gossip among secretaries spreads the fastest. After chatting about various unrelated topics, Harvey finally revealed his purpose. I need you to take over a case for me. You're sending me a client? Martin shook his head and glanced outside at Rachel. What case? Harvey handed over the file folder he'd been holding. Martin curiously opened it and immediately looked up in surprise at Harvey. Harlan Wyatt's communication patent? Harlan Wyatt was a genius electrical engineer who, at just 29, had developed a compact satellite phone nearly 10 times smaller than the bulky satellite phones of the 90s, roughly the size of a regular cell phone. On the morning Martin and Harvey met in the elevator on the way to Los Angeles, they had discussed this. Harvey had mentioned that the patent would soon be transacted, and Martin congratulated Harvey on being able to afford that niche Tesla sports car. Unexpectedly, something went wrong. As Martin flipped through the documents, he asked, the patent application was rejected? Obviously. Harvey leaned back in the sofa chair. If it weren't for my assistant lawyer, who doesn't even know how to fill out a patent application, this patent wouldn't have been delayed by a full 24 hours before submission. The aftermath of not attending law school. Martin quipped, then paused while flipping through the documents. Rapid Data Company? The computer hardware company worth billions? The trouble isn't with Rapid Data. Harvey shook his head. The real trouble lies in the court. Martin looked up again. What's the issue with the court? Harvey glanced around to confirm that no one except Rachel was nearby, then stood up and walked over to Martin, whispering a sentence. The judge handling this case is currently negotiating a divorce with his wife because I slept with her. Martin almost jumped under the table in shock. What? Are you serious? Harvey gave an indescribable expression in response. Martin thought for a moment, stood up, closed the glass door of the office, and even locked it. He then pulled Harvey over to the floor-to-ceiling window, the farthest point from the office door. What exactly happened? Harvey, true to his profession as a lawyer, succinctly summarized the entire situation in just a few words. Last month, Harvey visited an art gallery to cultivate his artistic sensibilities and met a beautiful painter with charm and grace. They almost ended up in bed together. The reason they didn't was that Harvey only discovered the painter was married after taking off his clothes. It wouldn't have been an issue, but later, the painter got into a huge argument with her husband, a judge, and in anger, claimed she had an affair with Harvey. Now they're in the middle of a divorce, and Harvey, unfortunately, ended up in the hands of this judge, who believes Harvey cuckolded him. Alright, two guys who forgot their law school graduation oaths are now facing off. The key isn't whether you actually slept with his wife. Martin shook his head bitterly. The problem is that you can't use this as a reason to request the judge's recusal unless you want to anger all the judges in New York. So I came to ask for your help. Harvey remained much calmer than Martin. If you take over this case, perhaps you can calm the judge down. Or make him angrier. Martin shook his head repeatedly. Do you know what it means if I take this case? It means one more person knows about the judge's scandal. I know, I'm just hoping against hope, trying not to push things too far. Harvey let out a long sigh, as if he had found relief. Since you think the same way, it seems I have no choice but to eliminate that judge. With a gun, or a rocket launcher? Martin didn't believe him for a second. Harvey shook his head. I've been in this industry for 20 years, I still have some friends in the Department of Justice. You want him to undergo a due diligence review so he can't handle this case for the time being? Martin immediately understood. Things that can't be resolved in court can often be handled easily at the Department of Justice. After all, the main job of those in the U.S. Department of Justice is to nitpick at the court's work. Martin looked enviously at Harvey, who appeared confident. These are called connections midline horizontal ellipsis. There's no two-way about it. End of chapter. Chapter 45. Reported after Harvey left, Rachel Zane walked in to explain today's schedule. From 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m., you will discuss the acquisition issue with Carl Fisk, the owner of Fisk Hotel. At noon, you have lunch with the Regional Administrative Prosecutor of New York. At 3:15 p.m. The day was packed full, leaving no real personal time until 8 p.m. Martin raised an eyebrow. Maybe we should discuss what a venture capital lawyer is? Harvey told you. Rachel, who was about to leave, stopped and turned around with a smile. Can you tell me which company you gave him? Martin pretended to be profound and shook his head. You're disappointed, madam. He didn't come to question or ask for clients. No. Rachel was slightly surprised. Is it because of the big trouble Mike Ross caused? Mike? You mean he didn't apply for Wyatt's patent in time, leading to its preemption? Martin thought for a moment and shook his head again. That's not a big problem. Harvey has a way to handle this. Then he added somewhat jealously, as a secretary, maybe you should focus more on your boss instead of the mistakes of those young male colleagues who only have looks but no abilities. Although he didn't want to have any relationship beyond friendship with Rachel, his territorial instincts still made him a bit annoyed. Rachel noticed Martin's little thoughts, raising her eyebrows and making a funny face as if saying, I can't help it with such a boss. Okay boss, what do you want to know? Why did I suddenly get the nickname venture capital lawyer? Of course, it's because of your working style. Rachel shrugged, walked out to fetch a newspaper, and then returned to the office to hand it over. Martin thought he had appeared in large commercial newspapers like the New York Observer or the Washington Post. But when he took it, it was Pinocchio Monthly. This wasn't some unserious newspaper but an internal publication of Harvard Law School. In the 1940s, a fast food restaurant named Pinocchio Fast Food opened near Harvard University. Its signature dish, square pizza, was highly praised by many law school students. Gradually, Pinocchio Fast Food became a fixed gathering spot for Harvard Law School students. In the 1960s, a student founded a monthly newsletter for the law school, mainly publishing interesting anecdotes from the college and recent classic cases and court rulings. This monthly newsletter was called Pinocchio Monthly. More than half a century later, the Pinocchio restaurant is now operated by the third-generation heir, providing food and self-study meeting places for generations of Harvard Law School students. A square meat sauce pizza, a cup of coffee, a book, a notebook, and a pen. This was the shared memory of all Harvard Law School graduates. Pinocchio Monthly also survived. Not only students and professors of the law school but also judges and lawyers who graduated long ago often published articles related to law in it. Martin had submitted a few articles during his studies, got 2 accepted, and successfully gained recognition among the powerful legal community of Harvard graduates worldwide. The power of this campus cultural heritage was quite terrifying. For Pearson Hardman, a firm that only recruits Harvard Law School graduates, this newspaper was naturally essential. From junior to senior lawyer, all it takes is one party. The article was written by the firm's boss, Jessica Pearson. Martin chuckled and shook his head. Within the range of junior to senior lawyers, the firm doesn't care how much money the lawyer can earn for the firm but whether they have professional ability and development potential as a lawyer. After all, lawyers below the senior level mainly assist a few big partners in handling cases for their major clients and international giants. For example, the acquisition case Jessica handed over to Martin. As for the dozen contracts signed at the party, they weren't worth much at present. As mentioned earlier, before going public, those friends in the mutual aid group were just a bunch of kids worth hundreds of millions but with little cash. The highest advisory fee was $150,000 annually from the founder of MS, and the lowest was from the chief legal counsel of the Hope Fund, currently considered volunteer work. However, the quality of these contracts was high. 13 founders of tech companies favored by media venture capital, one charity fund valued at over $500 million despite not being formally operational. Although Martin hadn't fully demonstrated his professional abilities as a lawyer yet, his development potential was certainly enough. After detailed inquiries, Jessica once mentioned wanting to write an article about Martin's experience and submit it to Pinocchio Monthly, and Martin didn't object. This was an excellent opportunity to gain exposure in the industry. He didn't expect it to be published so quickly. Jessica's article detailed how Martin found those peers still starting businesses in garages and dorms during his university days and how he grew alongside these founders. It must be said that Jessica's writing was pretty good. Although not as flamboyant as The Great Gatsby, it was logically clear and easy to understand. You could almost see the scene of Martin, studying law, and a group of tech nerds huddled in a garage, deep in thought in front of computers. Martin Scott made me realize that the value of a lawyer isn't in how much enviable attorney fees you earn, but whether you sincerely stand in the client's shoes, providing them with legal sales for their life and career. Martin blushed. After reading it carefully, Martin folded the newspaper and handed it back to Rachel. Well, it seems I'm going to be famous. You already are. Rachel took back the newspaper and smiled. According to unreliable rumors, Professor Peter Graffold, the dean of your law school, is very interested in the novel thinking and legal spirit displayed in this article and intends to invite you back to give a lecture to the juniors. Professor Graffold liked me before. I even attended their Thanksgiving dinner. Martin tilted his head indifferently, but giving lectures is impossible. The success or failure of anything needs time to verify. He couldn't be so impatient. At least wait until 1 or 2 companies go public. Otherwise, who knows if I'll become a joke in the future. It's still good news, isn't it? Rachel shrugged. Any other instructions? Martin pondered for a moment. When Mr. Fisk arrives, remember to prepare 2 paper cup cakes from the tea room besides coffee. Preferably vanilla flavor since I don't know Mr. Fisk's taste yet, and vanilla is the safest. While taking notes, Rachel curiously asked, "Do you really think that cupcake business can grow big?" "I don't know, there's no precedent." Martin stretched lazily in his chair, "But that doesn't stop me from trying, right?" End of chapter. Chapter 46. The hotel merger case. At 9:45 a.m., Mr. Carl Fisk, the owner of Fisk Hotel, appeared in the conference room of Pearson Hardman Law Firm. Although Jessica, his personal legal advisor and close friend, didn't have time to handle his case, she still made time to visit the conference room to chat with him out of respect and to maintain their friendship. After all, she had handed over the case to Martin, but he had broken his promise last time due to the Facebook matter, only arranging for an associate lawyer to temporarily step in. No matter how you looked at it, it was somewhat impolite. As the big boss of the firm, Jessica had the responsibility to clean up after her subordinates. 5 minutes before 10 a.m., Martin rushed into the conference room just in time to see the two chatting happily. Knowing well that the two were close friends, Martin used humor to ease the awkwardness of meeting Fisk for the first time. "Jessica, I know missing our appointment last time made you lose face in front of Mr. Fisk, but there's really no need to spank my butt in front of him." The seasoned businesswoman Jessica immediately understood, inwardly admiring this subordinate's sharp wit while not forgetting to continue the banter. "Martin, you've made another mistake. Spanking makes me feel like I'm your mother's age. Maybe deducting your bonus would be a better choice." After teasing her key subordinate, Jessica turned to Carl Fisk. "This is Martin Scott, a somewhat unruly but highly capable guy." Carl Fisk, in his 40s, showed no sign of dissatisfaction from being stood up last time. Instead, he shook hands with Martin with a smile. "I know him, I saw him on financial news last time, Facebook and Microsoft, right? That was a deal that attracted a lot of attention in the business world." "Jessica, geniuses are always a bit unruly, and it's precisely because of this that they can achieve what ordinary people cannot, right? Successful elders always like to show their fondness and support for the young. It wasn't that they truly cared about the young, it was just that such gestures, which cost nothing, were incredibly cost-effective. Only nouveau riche would care so much about their faces." Jessica felt completely relieved. "Carl, although you're willing to speak on his behalf, mistakes still need to be punished. How about letting him bring a bottle of Bordeaux wine to the celebration dinner afterward? I remember that's your favorite." After months of familiarity, Martin and Jessica had developed basic mutual understanding. 1992 vintage Le Grill, produced by the Savvy Vineyard in southern Bordeaux. "I will personally get it for Mr. Fisk. Everyone knows Bordeaux's Lafite, but few know about Le Grill wine. This wine wasn't particularly expensive. Even in a great year like 1992, a bottle cost only about $300, far from the so-called 1982 Lafite or $1 million Romanée Conti. However, After wines like Lafite and Ace of Spades were excessively exposed and hyped in public, true top-tier banquets had long blacklisted these wines. What do those who consider themselves upper class pursue? They pursue sophistication. They pursue things that others haven't even heard of. $1 million bottle of wine. It seems like anyone can afford it. How could someone from old money be like those nouveau riche, chasing whatever's trendy? Wouldn't that lower their status? Therefore, the bottle of Le Grill wine Martin offered, though not expensive, with over a decade of cellar aging and an exclusive elite brand concept, perfectly tickled the fancy of someone like Fisk, who considered himself part of high society. After successfully resolving any potential issues from the missed appointment last time, Jessica gracefully exited, leaving the conference room to Martin and Carl. Although Carl Fisk was an annual fee-paying client of the firm and this legal consultation didn't require hourly billing, Martin didn't want to waste time on unrelated topics like football and celebrity gossip. As soon as he sat down, he waved to someone outside. Rachel, who had been waiting outside, walked in holding a thick folder. After communicating with you last time, my assistant flew to Los Angeles overnight to relay your requirements exactly as instructed. Although Priya went to Los Angeles mainly to take over as Facebook's legal counsel and had little thought or opportunity to mention this merger case, it didn't stop Martin from using a white lie to demonstrate his importance placed on Fisk. These documents are the due diligence we conducted with KPMG accounting firm these days, including operational and financial data of Fisk Hotel and the acquisition target, French Morley Hotel. My God! Carl Fisk couldn't help but exclaim as he looked at the dictionary-thick folder on the conference table. How much time do I have to read through all these files? Of course not. I don't want to waste a billionaire's precious time. Martin smiled and shook his head. Those are just backups, so I can find relevant data and investigation content whenever you have questions. Although my photographic memory doesn't actually need them, ears are never as reliable as eyes, right? He then took out a sheet of A4 paper from the folder in front of him and handed it over. This is what you need to confirm. It contains the most critical data and a summary of the merger strategy from that pile of folders. I love summaries, they always save me a lot of time. Carl Fisk sighed in relief, took the document, and started reading it bit by bit. Fisk Hotel had 31 chain hotels in North America, and the market potential in this region was already limited. In recent years, Carl Fisk had been thinking about expanding the business to Europe. After some exploration, the small but historic Morley Hotel caught his eye. This brand had only 9 chain hotels in a few major cities in France and Germany. In terms of scale, it was much smaller than Fisk Hotel. However, the majority shareholder, the Morley family, had nearly a century of hotel operation experience and extensive connections and a good reputation in the European hotel industry. This was exactly the resource Carl Fisk needed most right now. One wanted to use the Morley family's connections to enter Europe, and the other wanted Fisk's capital to further expand the family business. The founding families of the two hotel brands hit it off and began the prelude to this merger. Since it was a merger, the key issue was the shareholding ratio of both parties in the newly formed Cooperative Hotel Management Company. How much assets each party would contribute to the new company, how many new hotels they planned to build, whether to use the Morley family's connections to capture the European tourism market, etc., were all crucial factors affecting the shareholding ratio in the new company. Such cross-border mergers involving tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars weren't easily concluded, especially in traditional industries like the hotel industry, which required large investments and had slow return cycles. Both parties were always extra cautious before deciding to cooperate. Martin wouldn't be surprised if this case took 1 or 2 years to negotiate. Since it was the first meeting with the client, Martin didn't offer a concrete merger plan, just allowing Carl Fisk to have a clear and intuitive understanding of Morley Hotel and a basic concept for the upcoming negotiations. The 2.5-hour meeting passed quickly amid discussions and Q&A. Before leaving, Fisk suddenly mentioned the most common and troublesome issue in merger cases. If the cooperation succeeds, what do you think the new hotel should be called, Fisk Morley or Morley Fisk? Martin showed a somewhat conflicted expression for the first time today. After pondering for a moment, Martin helplessly shook his head. Carl, I think we should solve the other issues first and slowly consider this later. After all, the story of Mercedes-Benz is just an exception and has no reference value. Have a cupcake, it can replenish the energy consumed by the brain after that high-speed consumption. My good friend made them by hand. End of chapter. Chapter 47. Leonard's shirt. Because of his early departures and late returns, Martin, although living with Sheldon and the others, always felt like he was missing out on a lot of interesting plotlines. For instance, now, after a busy day, he returned to the apartment to find Leonard pacing around the living room in a blue American-style shirt and corduroy trousers, looking visibly anxious. The most obvious signs were the noticeable sweat stains on the collar, chest, and underarms. It looked as if Leonard had run 5 kilometers in that shirt. On the other side of the living room, Sheldon was sitting at the desk playing on the computer. Leonard, you don't look too good, Martin said as he walked toward his bedroom, loosening his tie and unbuttoning his shirt. He added casually, I must say, the cut of your shirt is just terrible. Aside from being loose and comfortable, it has no design aesthetics. Can you stop making sarcastic remarks? Leonard's expression grew even more gloomy. Martin, I need your help. Can it wait until I've taken a shower and changed into my loungewear? Martin didn't turn around. Talking to you in this suit comes with a price, $7.50 an hour isn't cheap. I've got a date with Penny tonight. Martin immediately stopped in his tracks and turned back, surprised to see Leonard standing there fidgeting with his fingers. What did you say? I said midline horizontal ellipsis I'm going out with Penny tonight, and I need some advice. Because of his mature demeanor and steady personality, Martin, though a year younger than the 4 members of the Nerd Squad, often played the role of an older brother in real life. Aside from Sheldon occasionally teasing him about being a humanities PhD, who contributed nothing to human technological progress, the other 3 instinctively sought his help whenever they encountered problems. Just like now. Martin turned back and approached Leonard. Are you serious? In America, you can casually sleep with anyone, opposite sex or same sex. It's just a mutual exchange to satisfy physiological needs, it doesn't carry any extra meaning. No strings attached, no expectations. You can have multiple partners you're attracted to, and no one will call you a jerk for it. Take Martin and Caroline, for example. They've slept together more than 10 times, but they never ask each other about their feelings or whether they have new partners. However, if you're asking someone out on a date, it's a completely different story. It means you want to develop a formal and stable romantic relationship, what we call dating. Beyond just sleeping together, You need to invest your emotions, remain faithful to the relatively private relationship, and avoid any mental or physical infidelity, at least until the breakup. To sum it up, hookup partners are just for satisfying physiological needs, while a dating partner fulfills emotional needs as well. So Martin didn't care much about Leonard's escapades with Priya or Leslie, but when he heard Leonard wanted to ask Penny out, he immediately became serious. He stood 2 steps away from Leonard, scrutinizing him up and down. "Okay. What do you need me to do? How do I look?" Leonard awkwardly spread his arms, making the sweat stains under his armpits even more noticeable. Martin could faintly smell the mix of deodorant and cologne. Due to certain genetic factors, about 60% of Caucasians still have apocrine sweat glands, which keep their ear canals oily and make their body odor stronger, sometimes causing discomfort. Ironically, apocrine sweat glands are the most important organs for animals during mating. Think about how cats and dogs sniff each other's butts when they first meet, it's the same principle. Martin frowned as he circled Leonard. "Honestly, you look terrible." "I knew it." Leonard dropped his arms in despair. "What should I do now? Should I go tell Penny to cancel the date?" "It's just a date, you're too nervous." Martin shook his head and pointed to the bathroom door. "Go take a quick shower, just rinse off, and wash away all that smell. I'll go to your room and find you an outfit suitable for a date." Half an hour later, Leonard left wearing a white striped shirt, with conversation topics for the date written on his palms. Although he was still sweating a bit from nervousness, at least it wasn't as noticeable as with the blue shirt. Martin shook his head helplessly, sighed deeply, and sat down on the couch. "You sat in my spot." Sheldon, who had been facing away from the couch while playing on the computer, suddenly turned around and looked at him sternly. Martin instantly jumped up and moved to the other side of the couch to sit down again. "Sorry, I forgot you were still in the apartment." Then he asked curiously, "How did you know I sat on your spot? You didn't even look." Sheldon turned back, his expression more relaxed, and his tone carried a hint of pride. Even though everything is machine-made these days, each cushion still has a slightly different sewing structure. This affects the rate and volume of air expelled when compressed, creating distinct audio frequencies and volumes. "You're saying you knew just by the sound of air escaping the cushion?" Martin looked incredulous. "When did you evolve to such a high level? Or is your OCD acting up again? Maybe I should take you to see a psychologist tomorrow." Many people have mild OCD, like feeling uncomfortable seeing a messy room or worrying that the door wasn't locked after leaving home. Sheldon's OCD was a bit different. What time to wake up, what time to use the bathroom, which route to take to work, where to sit in the cafeteria at lunch, what to eat based on the day of the week, what games to play at night, all of this, Sheldon meticulously planned down to the minute, repeating in weekly cycles. He called this lifestyle homeostasis. Once this homeostasis was disrupted, Sheldon would fall into a near-frantic state. That stern look earlier was the final warning before losing control. Believe me, you wouldn't want to know what happens next. Haven't you noticed how Penny has been trained to behave properly? That said, although everyone constantly complained about Sheldon's homeostasis, the disciplined lifestyle did bring them some benefits. For example, Penny, who used to fluctuate in weight, has maintained a consistent figure since moving here. After pondering for a moment, Martin suddenly said, "Sheldon, come sit on the couch. Let's talk." Sheldon glanced at Martin, then at his computer, hesitated for a moment, and finally stood up to sit in his designated spot on the couch. If it's about emotional or psychological issues, I'm sorry, but I can't help you right now. After all, I still can't fully grasp the difference between jokes and sarcasm. Besides, I'm currently writing a paper on subatomic particles and M-theory midline horizontal ellipsis, what ordinary people call string theory. Martin shook his head. It's just a chat. Sheldon rarely encountered such sudden, reasonless conversations and appeared somewhat uneasy. 2 years in New York, how does it feel? Martin thought for a moment and asked, I mean, how's life here and your work at the university? Are there any areas where you're not adjusting well? Sheldon looked puzzled. Obviously, my superior brain makes my adaptability stronger than most people's. Why are you suddenly asking me this? Is it because your recent bed activities have been too frequent? I've noticed that you haven't come back to the apartment to sleep on schedule twice this week. Twice a week counts as frequent. Are you looking down on me? End of chapter. Chapter 48. Sheldon's little classroom. Of course, Martin couldn't possibly discuss bedroom-related issues with Sheldon, who had no experience in such matters. The incident involving Mary Cooper and their department head at university was enough to make him feel conflicted and troubled. Martin just wanted to know a question that had been bothering him since childhood. What was the connection between this world and the previous one? Why did he wake up here after sleeping? Now that Sheldon had evolved into his completed form, perhaps he could explain this issue. I mean, bringing you to New York might have changed the entire trajectory of your life. If it weren't for me, you might have gone to Caltech. Of course, Leonard and the others are still there. You know, New Yorkers aren't as warm and friendly as Californians. I don't know if this will cause any trouble for your life or work. When it came to the secrets of his time travel and altering the storyline, Martin completely lacked the logic and rationality expected of a lawyer. Sheldon listened quietly to Martin's words, thought for a moment, and then suddenly realized. Oh. So you want to discuss whether multidimensional spaces and parallel worlds exist? Martin gave a meaningful shake of his head. Damn it, you're supposed to be a genius. I've already beaten around the bush so much, and you summarized my question in one sentence. Did you get full marks on the reading comprehension section of the college entrance exam? Sheldon obviously didn't know how intense Martin's mental activity was at the moment. Very interesting. Although, thanks to my guidance, your mathematical abilities have surpassed those of an average undergraduate in the sciences, I must point out that the mathematical proof process for multidimensional spaces might be beyond your understanding. To make it easier for you to grasp, we'd better start from the basics. Sheldon stood up from the couch, pulled a whiteboard next to the fridge over to the sofa, and unscrewed a marker. Martin suddenly felt he had made a wrong decision. In mathematical terms, the entire world is composed of spatial dimensions. As you know, zero dimension is a point with no length or width, though this point is also just a projection. One dimension is a line with only length, 2 dimensions form a plane, and 3 dimensions create a solid. Just by induction, we can see that each dimension builds a new coordinate axis perpendicular to the previous one. If you're skeptical, I have 4 other methods to prove this. Of course, some people consider time as a dimension, but I must say this is a delusion born from a complete lack of mathematical understanding because time has no meaning in mathematics. 3 hours later, Sheldon began expressing the existence of 11-dimensional space using new mathematical forms. After 8 dimensions, Martin found it hard to keep up and had to ask him to slow down a bit. After all, the hippocampus in the brain is responsible for memory, while the right brain handles logic and spatial abilities. They're entirely different things. Even so, Martin listened with great interest to Sheldon's explanation, trying his best to understand the meaning of every sentence and every equation on the whiteboard. This was the frontier of human knowledge in geometry and spatial mathematics. Can you understand it? It's like flying into space in a spaceship and hitting the wall at the edge of the universe. Don't you want to see what's on the other side of the wall? Maybe there are aliens, or perhaps another mirror universe. It's even possible that our universe is just a grain of sand in another world. Who knows when unimaginably huge aliens might pick it up to build a house? Just thinking about it feels so exciting. Without being reborn, one wouldn't know how important knowledge and learning are to a person. However, this didn't answer Martin's initial question. What exactly was the nature of this world? Why, after bringing Sheldon to New York, did Leonard and Penny still appear? Martin always felt that this world seemed to have self-awareness, constantly correcting the butterfly effect caused by his bug-like presence. Like those manga artists do to their two-dimensional creations. Okay. I think I roughly understand, at least up to 8 dimensions, there's no problem. Martin raised his hand like an elementary school student. Sheldon, have you ever thought about whether consciousness arises from self and environmental control, or if someone is controlling us from the shadows? You know, like in movies and comics. Sheldon, interrupted, didn't show any dissatisfaction. After all, he had seen too many foolish students at school. Martin could only be considered an average level among ordinary people. This was also why he had never taken on a teaching position at the university. Sheldon put down the pen and said seriously, "Perhaps you remember that I encountered philosophical confusion during my early days at the University of Texas at Austin when I was 11. This almost made me drop out. This is also why, besides physics, I chose philosophy as another doctoral major." Martin nodded. Young Sheldon had high hopes for university. After a series of struggles with Mary, he finally gained permission to attend the university in his state early. However, in his first class, he encountered the biggest crisis of his life. That was the compulsory philosophy theory course. Anyone who has studied philosophy knows that the initial period of learning is simply a time of doubting life. Sheldon was no exception. On the first day, he was depressed. He didn't know whether he was a real person or just a dream of a butterfly. Having pursued truth all his life, he suddenly felt that his existence was meaningless. He became depressed, lying in bed and refusing to go to school because he thought going to school was meaningless. He feared that he might wake up at any moment and, driven by instinct, flutter his colorful wings to sip cherry blossom nectar. It was Martin who persuaded Sheldon's grandmother to scare him with a hen, making him get up and board the school bus. Fortunately, the philosophy teacher had seen this situation many times. A single sentence, "It's precisely because it has no meaning that we must seek what true meaning is," revived Sheldon instantly. He almost abandoned the full scholarship from the physics department for philosophy. Philosophy can be deadly. Sheldon clearly categorized Martin's questions about parallel spaces and the origin of consciousness under this scope. On the surface, consciousness is formed by habitual ways of thinking derived from human life experiences and interactions with others. Scientifically speaking, consciousness is the result of different hormone levels produced by various combinations of hundreds of electrical signals in the brain. The theory you mentioned about others or gods controlling our consciousness is similar to certain philosophical doctrines preached by many religions. A rather profound question, and Sheldon analyzed and explained it from 4 perspectives: mathematics, sociology, biological science, and religious philosophy. Is this the power of the chosen one? Although Martin's question remained unresolved, the breadth of knowledge and depth of research were enough to leave one in awe. End of chapter. Chapter 49. Thanksgiving plans. The next day was Saturday and Martin for once didn't get up early to go jogging in the nearby park. Instead, he smashed the alarm clock that disturbed his sleep against the wardrobe door and went back to sleep. He had absorbed too much knowledge and information last night and needed time to digest it. It definitely wasn't because of the sudden drop in temperature in New York over the past couple of days. Unexpectedly, before 8:30 a.m., there was a knock on the door. Tap tap tap, Martin. Tap tap tap, Martin. Tap tap tap, Martin. Without even hearing the voice, this signature knocking pattern clearly belonged to Sheldon. Come in. Martin mumbled from under the covers. Sheldon opened the door and walked in, curious to see Martin curled up in bed. Martin, given Mrs. Scott's instructions to me, I must remind you that you haven't done your morning exercise today. Why don't you ever join me? Countered Martin. Maintaining regular physical activity helps sustain your advantage in romantic relationships. But with my IQ of 187, I have no need for stable intimate relationships, so I don't require it. Get out. Sheldon turned and walked toward the door, clearly puzzled as to why his childhood friend suddenly got angry. Muggles' emotions are so unpredictable. Halfway out, Sheldon turned back and said, "Just a reminder, it's World of Warcraft gaming time this morning. Howard and Rajesh are already here. We're heading to explore the Black Temple in half an hour. Go find Penny," came muffled voice of Martin finally deciding to get up at 10 in the morning. Martin emerged wearing comfortable, soft loungewear. When he walked into the living room, he found the nerd squad and Penny sitting neatly around the sofa, each holding a laptop and engrossed in gaming. "Good morning, Martin." Howard was the first to raise his hand in greeting. "I've never seen you sleep until 10. I thought you'd been trained by Sheldon to become another homeostasis robot since childhood." Martin grabbed a carton of milk from the fridge and put it in the microwave. Occasional indulgence is what makes decadence enjoyable. If it were frequent, it wouldn't be fun anymore. After heating the milk, Martin took it out, sipping while standing behind them to watch the game screen. Then, as if suddenly reminded of something, he asked, "Guys, Thanksgiving is coming up. Do you have any plans?" Thanksgiving falls on the 4th Thursday of November every year. This year it was on November 22nd, just next week. This holiday was created by Europeans who had just arrived on this continent to thank God and the Native Americans for their help. Thanksgiving is the second biggest holiday in North America after Christmas, marking the busiest and most spend-heavy period of the year for all industries and people. Students were about to go on vacation, merchants began promotions, Hollywood blockbusters started rolling out, and friends and lovers began pondering what gifts to buy. This frenzy would continue until Valentine's Day the following year. Upon hearing Martin's question, Sheldon was the first to respond. "You mean that festival originating from agrarian civilization, where people must gather to eat and celebrate the year's harvest?" I thought we had long escaped such primitive ways of life. And you should remember that my Uncle Carl died after being bitten by an illegally invading badger while fixing the chimney on Thanksgiving. I still remember the last thing he said to me. Martin placed his hand on Sheldon's shoulder. Sheldon, this is a socially established social contract. Sheldon immediately fell silent. There was no point reasoning with someone who despised all holidays, it was better to simply state it as a tradition. At this moment, Penny turned her head. Sorry, on Thanksgiving night, there's double the tips and hourly wages. I still owe rent, so I can't resist the temptation. Although Penny aspired to become an actress, opportunities were scarce, and she worked as a waitress to make ends meet. Martin realized that there were quite a few waitresses around him. Penny, Caroline, Max, and even Sheldon's sister Missy Cooper. Did only waitresses represent the hardships of life? Howard also spoke somewhat awkwardly. You know my situation midline horizontal ellipsis. I need to have turkey dinner with my mom on Thanksgiving night. He was the only one among them who still lived with his mother after adulthood, which made him feel embarrassed, but he couldn't give up his mother's delicious meals. Not like it's the first time knowing you, I've long been mentally prepared. Martin shrugged indifferently and then looked at Rajesh. I called Priya. She might only return to New York by Christmas. After asking everyone, the only ones attending the Thanksgiving dinner would be Sheldon, Leonard, Rajesh, and himself. At least it was still a foursome. Martin decided to hold the dinner at the Cheesecake Factory where Penny worked. Though it was a fast food place serving burgers and fries, it was much classier than Williamsburg restaurant. After confirming the Thanksgiving plans, the others continued their journey through the Black Temple, while Martin brought out his laptop to check his financial situation. The day after Thanksgiving was the famous Black Friday, where all stores and products across the U.S. offered unimaginable discounts, a perfect time for shopping sprees. Don't think only women like shopping. When men have money, their spending speed and scale are beyond women's imagination. Martin opened a row of bank account pages on his browser and silently calculated the numbers in his mind. After working for 4 months, his salary and other miscellaneous incomes totaled nearly $190,000. Compared to other newly graduated PhDs, this income was already quite impressive. Sheldon and the others earned around $100,000 a year. However, there was only a little over $50,000 in cash in his bank account now, the rest had gone toward paying off credit cards. It wasn't that he didn't want to save money, it was because saving meant having to pay taxes obediently. It was more cost-effective to consume directly and offset with consumption tax. Damn IRS. Less than $60,000 in cash and nearly $500,000 in total credit card limits, this was Martin's entire liquid assets. Compared to those predecessors who, upon transmigrating, easily earned billions, he seemed to be struggling on the surface. But there was no help for it. After transmigrating, Martin realized that making money wasn't as simple as those novels from his previous life depicted. For instance, some suggested stock trading or futures trading based on past trends, especially during those big market movements. But Martin hadn't paid any attention to these things in his previous life, so recalling them was impossible. Others suggested directly investing in surefire hit movies or TV shows, signing checks, and sitting back at home waiting for the money to roll in. Martin could only say that they trusted the integrity of those entertainment industry folks too much. After all, the Harry Potter film series reportedly showed losses on paper. Without sending out financial oversight personnel, those old hands would naturally exploit you. Who else would they exploit? Some even suggested starting a business, saying that after reincarnating, one should at least play around as a billionaire. Martin had considered this idea. But back in 7th grade, he once sneaked into his family's small study and found a Senate proposal to sanction Boeing for monopolizing the North American market. Then, thinking about 6 months ago, a supposed board member of Airbus visited his nominal father, chatting and laughing with evident respect and importance. One was one of the two giants in the global aviation industry, and the other was the chief aide of a powerful senator in Congress. Martin immediately abandoned the idea of making money and ran to the bookstore to buy a copy of Legal Literacy, studying it day and night without pause. Seeing this, his father's face revealed a gratified smile. End of chapter. Chapter 50. Caroline's father. After spending a weekend of eating and waiting to die, Martin finally adapted to the somewhat cold New York. On Monday morning, besides wearing an expensive suit, he also added a thin overcoat. From behind, he bore some resemblance to those handsome Italian mob hitmen. As soon as he arrived at the firm, Martin heard a new piece of gossip. Harlan Wyatt's pocket satellite phone patent had been officially acquired by Rapid Data Company for $400 million. Martin shook his head enviously. Although Harvey was sometimes emotional, but his abilities were unquestionable. Just after arriving at the office, Rachel walked in with 2 cups of coffee, low on sugar and milk. "Martin, Ms. Caroline Channing is here. I thought you wouldn't refuse to let her into the office." "Caroline?" Martin was taken aback. "Is today the day she comes to deliver cakes to the firm?" Rachel gave an affirmative gesture. Soon, Caroline appeared at the office door, blonde hair, brown eyes, tall and slender. "Caroline, I'm glad to see you here. I didn't expect you to appear in Manhattan again." Martin didn't avoid any suspicion and directly hugged Caroline warmly, lightly pecking her lips. "Is it because you missed me, or because you've moved on from the past and are welcoming the future?" "Things won't pass so quickly, Martin." Caroline looked around this large office with some nostalgia and then smiled. "You don't know how much courage it took for me to get on the subway to Upper East Side today. For others, it's just a normal trip, but for you, it's a big step towards a new life." Martin shamelessly altered Armstrong's famous quote upon stepping onto the moon. Caroline made a helpless expression. "I just hope Max can sleep 1 more hour." The two sat down on the sofa. Martin picked up his coffee and took a sip. "Actually, I suggested that Max quit her nanny job, but she always thinks I'm a bad capitalist who exploits her." "Don't blame her, Martin. For people like her and me now, we have no ability to withstand risks. It's really hard to make a decision to change. For the rich and the poor, the meaning of entrepreneurship is completely different. For the wealthy, entrepreneurship is no different from venture capital. Even failing 10 times in a row won't significantly affect the entrepreneur's financial situation. As long as they succeed once, not only will they cover all the costs of previous failures, but their wealth will grow rapidly like a snowball. However, the poor cannot afford such trial and error. A single failure might prevent them from ever getting back on their feet." Since the last in-depth conversation with Max, Caroline finally understood her current situation. Martin pursed his lips and smiled. "I don't blame her, and I'm glad you seem more mature." Being cautious is a good thing for you right now. After chatting about the cake business for a while, Martin noticed that Caroline gradually became hesitant, as if she had something difficult to say. Caroline, if there's something you want to say, you can tell me directly. Even if you found a boyfriend and want to end our intimate relationship, it's okay. Although I might be sad for a few days, we'll still be good friends. Caroline quickly shook her head. No, it's not that. She then cautiously probed, it's you, right? Me? Martin pointed at himself in confusion, shaking his head to indicate he didn't understand what she meant. Caroline hesitated and said, last weekend, I visited my father in prison. He said that someone who didn't reveal their identity asked the guards to take better care of him. That person is you, right? Otherwise, I can't think of anyone else who would help me and my father now. Martin immediately realized. After resolving Amanda's case last time, Amanda was transferred from the Long Island prison, which housed serious offenders, to the relatively better conditions of Stanley prison. Martin, as her lawyer, participated throughout the transfer process and incidentally helped Amanda with her litigation loan-related matters. During this period, he unexpectedly discovered that Caroline's father, Martin Channing, the organizer of the largest Ponzi scheme in global history, was temporarily detained there. Once elegant and debonair, he had become somewhat despondent, quietly awaiting his court trial in a few months. By that time, hundreds of top tycoons and the world's best legal team would subject him to comprehensive mental torment under the watchful eyes of global media. Martin felt some concern, because he was the father of his friend. Before leaving, Martin met with the warden of Stanley prison, requesting that the prison treat Amanda a bit better, casually mentioning Mr. Channing as well. At least ensure he wasn't violated in prison. This wasn't illegal, the warden didn't refuse and instead took the opportunity to establish a good personal relationship with Martin Scott, a young and promising lawyer. Networking slowly forms through mutual needs. Martin simply did a favor, and to avoid trouble, he asked the warden not to mention that he had made the request to Mr. Channing. He hadn't expected him to find out. It seemed that the dark and burly warden took his request very seriously. Martin came back to his senses and saw Caroline looking at him with both nervousness and anticipation. He could only smile bitterly and shake his head. Previously, another client of mine was serving time at Stanley. When I went there to handle affairs, I learned that your father was there too, so I casually mentioned it to the prison staff. I'm sorry, given our firm's position, there's not much I can do to help your father. Caroline was almost moved to tears. You've already done everything you could, Martin. You helped me find work to support myself, and you provided a new oven and stable contracts for Max and my cake business. Now you're helping my father. Even though he deceived everyone in the world, he's still the father who loves me. I don't know what to say. I owe you so much. Unfortunately, to prevent possible sexual harassment, all offices were designed with fully transparent glass partitions. Otherwise, given Caroline's overly excited emotions, the two might have ended up on the large office desk, 2 meters long and 1 meter wide. Don't say that. You don't owe me anything. Martin handed her a tissue. You've reached where you are today through your own strength and courage. I admire and respect that and am willing to keep supporting you. Don't forget, I'm still your legal advisor, counting on the advisory fees to pay off my Porsche 911 monthly installments. Caroline instantly burst into laughter through her tears. Then you'd better pray that your colleagues won't get tired of the taste of cupcakes. Eating them every day can get boring. That's why I ordered 150 each day. Martin pointed to the office door. The firm has more than 700 people. 150 cakes are far from enough, ensuring they always feel fresh and desire more. Your supply contract will continue indefinitely. According to your business school terminology, this is called hunger marketing. A hint of admiration appeared in Caroline's eyes. Martin, you should go to Wharton. You're a business genius. Martin shrugged indifferently. Obviously, Harvard's law and history professors wouldn't agree with that view. End of chapter. Chapter 51, Team Formation. After seeing Caroline off, Martin began handling the Fisk Hotel merger case. This acquisition involved at least $50 million, possibly even exceeding $100 million. Combined with the cross-continental collaboration between North America and Europe, where business environments and legal systems differed vastly, it was impossible for Martin to handle everything alone. Under Jessica's direction, Louis Litt, the junior partner in charge of administrative and HR matters at the firm, quickly assembled a legal and negotiation team dedicated to the merger. Martin served as the team's chief leader, responsible for finalizing all matters and communicating with the client, Mr. Carl Fisk. Rachel also joined the team, overseeing all negotiation arrangements. 3 junior lawyers were assigned roles, one for merger strategy, one for addressing legal discrepancies between North America and Europe, and Priya Kothrapalli, recently promoted, who was temporarily unassigned until her return from California. Each junior lawyer was supported by an assistant attorney and an administrative secretary to handle document preparation. Colleagues from the finance, operations, and real estate departments also joined, bringing the total team to 19 members, a robust lineup. Martin stood in the corridor outside the glass-walled conference room, hands in pockets, gazing at the packed meeting space. For a moment, he felt dazed. 25 years ago, I was an errand boy at a middling law firm. Now, I'm leading Ivy League elites. If my parents from my past life could see this, they'd be proud. After an indeterminate time, a chubby figure quietly approached. Louis Litt, balding, round-faced, with large eyes, a high nose, and prominent buck teeth, glanced into the room before turning to Martin, who seemed lost in thought. Worried about what to say once you go in? Martin snapped back to reality. Just announcing roles and timelines. Nothing complicated, he replied, smiling. I was reflecting on how time flies. The last time I led a team like this was during Harvard's Ivy League debate tournament. The Ivy League alliance included Harvard, Penn, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, Dartmouth, Brown, and Cornell. These schools fostered healthy competition, with the annual debate tournament being a marquee event. Dominated by law and philosophy students, often well-born, charismatic, and considered ideal romantic partners, second only to football quarterbacks, the tournament drew political and business heavyweights. Half of U.S. presidents, 300-plus congressional members, and 70% of state governors had legal backgrounds. Even European and Asian legislatures, and warlords in developing nations, sent their children to elite law schools. Lawyers rule the world wasn't hyperbole. During the tournament's final rounds, Supreme Court justices judged, and party whips awarded trophies. Louis, a Harvard alum who'd failed to make the debate team due to his appearance, eyed Martin with envy. Must be a cherished memory. How did Harvard fare that year? Martin shot him a puzzled look. Is there any outcome besides first place? Louis choked silently. Martin chuckled and patted his back. Thanks for assembling the team so quickly, Louis. Louis recovered, shaking his head. No need. I owe you for the Steve Huffman matter. We signed Reddit's 3-year advisory contract last week, $5.77 million. By firm policy, 30% of that fee is yours. Congratulations. I've always liked the number 7, Martin replied. Steve's a solid partner. Let's collaborate more closely in the future. Absolutely. After more small talk, Louis left. Martin steadied himself, then entered the conference room. The chatter died instantly, as if a teacher had caught students off guard. Though younger than most present, his authority was unmatched. You've read the agenda. Our firm will provide full legal and negotiation support for Fisk Hotel's overseas merger. You have 30 minutes to ask questions or opt out. A junior lawyer in his 30s raised a hand. Martin, what's the estimated deal size? Between tens of millions to over $1 billion. But based on my calculations, it won't drop below $47 million, the minimum required for the merger's purpose. A female junior lawyer followed up, what's the target stance? Martin pulled up Rachel's PowerPoint, highlighting Molly Hotel's profile. The French Molly family, century-old hoteliers with stagnant operations but strong European connections, need Fisk's capital and management expertise. Fisk, saturated in North America, aims to expand into Europe. Their synergy is undeniable. 30 minutes later, no one withdrew. Martin nodded, satisfied. Progress meetings every Thursday. Adjourned. He rapped the gavel, a childish indulgence he'd waited years to fulfill. Chapter 52, Damn Monday. Based on prior experience, large mergers in traditional industries often drag on indefinitely. Martin wasn't in a rush, assign tasks, follow procedures, and let the two families decide. Unlike Harvey Specter, who pushed for win-win deals, Martin simply laid out the data for clients. Success. Irrelevant. After all, he billed by the hour. In his office, Martin cracked his stiff neck and glanced at his Jaeger-LeCoultre master control. 9:07 p.m. After a lazy weekend, Monday's workload hit like a truck. Hard work breeds progress. Laziness breeds comfort, wise words from ancient and modern alike. At least this nightmare Monday was over. He saved and backed up files, stretched, and left his office. Done for the day. Want to grab a bite? He asked Rachel Zane, still buried in paperwork. She shook her head wearily. Mondays are hell. I just want to sleep. Martin grinned. Cheer up, Black Friday's in 4 days. What'll you splurge on? Chanel No. 5. I make lists, but always end up with junk I don't need, Rachel sighed, packing up. That's why sociologists and psychologists get paid so much, Martin said. They hijack your senses, tricking you into needing things. Want proof? I'll introduce you to my neurology PhD friends. That's evil. Rachel huffed. Legalized robbery, countered Martin laughing. They rode the elevator to the parking garage. After parting ways, Martin hesitated, then drove to the cheesecake factory where Penny worked, though guilt lingered. Seeing Caroline again so soon might seem like cashing in favors. Compared to Williamsburg diners, the Cheesecake Factory was pristine. At least the chef looks like he washes his hands. Martin parked and sat at Penny's section to boost her tips. Usual order? Penny asked, pad in hand. Double cheeseburger, ham-egg sandwich, fried chicken, and iced OJ. She gaped. Trying to explode? Or did some breakup kill your gym routine? Neither. My brain's starved for sugar post-Monday chaos. I could eat a whole cow. Poor thing, Penny cooed, massaging his shoulders. You're overworked, honey. Martin slumped. Transitioning from lazy days to merger prep whiplash. Worth it, though. Deals pay better than lawsuits. Remember that vehicular manslaughter case? Ran around for a week for only $20,000. Penny froze. Asterisk a $300,000 lawyer wants pity from a $15 per hour server? Since when? Asterisk annoyed, she ruffled his slicked hair into a visual K mess. Martin chuckled, loosening his tie and unbuttoning his collar to match the disheveled look. Good genes let you rock any style. When Penny returned with 2 heaping plates, Martin demolished the food shamelessly, ham-egg sandwich in 3 bites, burger torn in 2. His gusto made the meal look Michelin-starred. Finally alive. Damn Monday, he groaned, leaning back. Penny slid into the booth across from him. Are servers allowed to stare at customers? He teased. I'm off soon. You're my last table. She hesitated. Need a ride? As Martin nibbled a wrap, he noticed her fidgeting. Why do all women look at me like this today? Penny, spit it out. Leonard asked me out Friday. Dinner, movie midline horizontal ellipsis. He's sweet, but midline horizontal ellipsis, she faltered. He's a physicist with a real career. I'm just a wannabe actress stuck waitressing. Does that midline horizontal ellipsis make sense? Martin parsed her rambling. Ah, she's insecure. End of chapter. Chapter 53, Love Consultation. Since Leonard's tentative proposal for a stable relationship last Friday, Penny oscillated between excitement and anxiety. Does he actually like me, or just want a physical partner? Will he mock me for not understanding his science talk? Will others think I'm after his status or paycheck? For days, these questions haunted her. She needed advice from a mutual friend. Sheldon. Uninterested in human rituals. Raj. Couldn't speak to women sober. Howard. If he'd stop eyeing my chest like a creep. Midline horizontal ellipsis that left Martin Scott, the only normal one in their group, despite his no-strings-attached dating history. Martin chewed slowly, listening as Penny vented. Asterisk a lawyer's core skill, active listening. Asterisk her concerns boiled down to class disparity. Leonard, Princeton physics PhD, comic book fan, stable Columbia researcher. Penny, high school graduate, Hollywood gossip enthusiast, struggling actress waitress. Their worlds collided, a cross-class romance requiring extra effort. Your doubts stem from dating outside your usual type, Martin said. It's like 8th grade first love all over again. Asterisk 7th grade. Penny interjected smugly. First kiss and boyfriend then. Martin's fork froze mid-air. Midline horizontal ellipsis first time too. Penny flushed. You really wanna know? Asterisk 7th grade. Asterisk Martin's mind reeled. In states 16 marks legal adulthood thresholds, but Penny's teenage rebellion clearly started early. Noticing his Howard-esque leer, she smacked his arm. Focus. Right. Martin straightened. If you choose Leonard, prepare for first love all over again, awkward conversations, mismatched intimacy rhythms midline horizontal ellipsis complete reboot. Penny groaned into the table. You're not helping. But, Martin countered, he's stable, kind, and moldable. Unlike Howard's creepiness or Raj's mutism, Leonard's blank slate. You can shape him into your ideal man. Penny's eyes lit up, visions of sculpting Leonard into a Leo-esque partner danced in her head. Martin popped the last onion ring, sighing. From 20-plus past relationships, he knew, women loved remodeling men. Asterisk, why wear that? It's hideous. Asterisk asterisk, quit gaming. Asterisk asterisk, shower before bed. Asterisk unconscious molding and then girlfriends bragging to friends. Asterisk, he used to be blah blah, now he's blah blah. Asterisk men who boasting about training their partners. Pure delusional. To women, they're Play-Doh. End of chapter. Chapter 54. Howard's invention. When Penny returned to her apartment, she still hadn't decided whether to pursue a relationship with Leonard. Martin advised patience, urging her to take time to explore their connection. Opening his own door, Martin found the science squad, Sheldon, Leonard, Howard, and Raj, huddled in his living room. Sheldon sat sulking on the couch with an Xbox controller, while the others buzzed around Howard's latest creation. Did I miss the plot to overthrow Sheldon's reign of terror? Martin quipped, loosening his tie. Leonard grinned. Depends, will you bail us out if things go sideways? Only if you fail, Martin shot back. Success means I get to finish the job. The group high-fived as Sheldon recoiled in mock horror. Howard stepped forward, brandishing a Motorola flip phone. Behold midline horizontal ellipsis the future. He flipped it open and commanded, call Martin Scott. 2 seconds later, Martin's phone rang, a rudimentary voice-activated dialing system in 2007, years before Series 2011 debut. Martin's eyes widened. How'd you pull this off? Howard explained it was a hobby project, a custom database storing their contacts, paired with a decoder sourced from a programming forum. The catch? Commercializing it required bypassing copyrighted code. Can you build your own decoder? Martin pressed. Howard hesitated. Maybe midline horizontal ellipsis, but I'd need time to reverse engineer it. Seizing the opportunity, Martin outlined the potential. This could be huge. Voice text the next frontier. The trio instantly formed a startup, Howard as engineer, Leonard and Raj as support, and Martin as legal advisor. Sheldon, excluded, bristled. You clearly lack a technical visionary. You, Leonard scoffed. Howard hacked your WoW account last year. Using NASA's supercomputer. Sheldon hissed, prompting Martin to feign alarm, tampering with federal systems? That's a national security risk. The group froze, Sheldon genuinely spooked, the others rolling their eyes, before dissolving into gaming laughter. As Howard packed up, Sheldon micromanaged the Xbox's return to its box, obsessive-compulsive as ever. Martin shook his head, some things never change. Chapter 55, Movie Theater Encounter. 2 days later, Thanksgiving arrived. As planned, Martin and the group had dinner at Penny's restaurant, a meal no different from usual, except for the doubled tips they left. Martin added extra to ensure Penny had a brighter holiday. By 6 p.m., the night was young. Thursdays typically meant Halo nights, holidays be damned. Sheldon, indifferent to celebrations, clung to routine. Leonard and Rajesh, veterans of failed social outings, opted for the apartment. Only Martin ventured out alone. After watching Leonard's car disappear, Martin drove his Porsche to a familiar cinema, bought a ticket for I Am Legend, and grabbed popcorn and soda. The theater brimmed with couples and friend groups. Martin, solo, claimed a front row seat, avoiding the back row's unspoken, couple zones, where passion often eclipsed the screen. As previews rolled, he munched popcorn. A petite figure slid into the adjacent seat, her perfume hinting at youth. So midline horizontal ellipsis alone. Her voice trembled with forced confidence. Martin smirked. What if I got stood up? No girl would ditch someone this hot. Her tone mimicked maturity, like a child playing dress-up. Martin glanced back, spotting giggling shadows, her friends. High school dare, he deduced. At 25, he'd seen this game 100 times. What's the bet? He asked. If I get your number, they're my minions Monday. Deal. He rattled off Rachel's number. Name's Martin. She typed eagerly. Thanks. Want company? Go, report your victory. She scampered off. Martin chuckled, he won't touch this shit even with a 10-foot pole. Even though unlike desperate Leonard or Howard, Martin's charm guaranteed options without chasing teens. The screen darkened, then lit with Will Smith's lone survivor in a ravaged New York. I Am Legend mirrored Martin's existential joke, Smith's character, the last human, himself, the sole time traveler knowing the next 13 years. End of chapter, chapter 56. I Am Your Uncle. As the credits rolled and the theater lights brightened, nearly everyone stood up, shuffling out while discussing the film's plot. Only Martin remained seated in the front row, one elbow propped on the armrest, legs crossed, staring blankly at the screen. He wasn't pondering any grand existential questions, he just hated crowds. Still, he couldn't help envying the movie's protagonist, who ultimately found other survivors. Meanwhile, Martin would forever bury his secret as a time traveler. Lonely. Absolutely. Once the theater emptied, Martin finally stood to leave, only to freeze. A girl, no older than 15 or 16, stormed into the auditorium and glared at him from the exit. Instinct told him it was the same girl who'd tried flirting earlier. She stood barely over 5 feet, with chestnut hair, wide eyes, and features that fell somewhere between cute and plain. Dressed in trendy high school attire, she radiated the confidence of someone popular. Oddly, she felt midline horizontal ellipsis familiar. Where are your friends? Martin asked, approaching her. You shithead, she shrieked. Why did you give me a fake number? Martin winced. I didn't want your parents thinking I'm some creep. You're underage. You're such a prude. Her voice cracked. I'm 15. Even my parents can't control my social life. Then my friends made me call you, and some woman answered, said she's your secretary. Do you know how humiliating that is? Monday at school's gonna be a nightmare. Martin rubbed his neck. Realistically, you'll get mocked. Maybe even ostracized. Her face flushed redder. Then why do it? Enjoy watching me crash and burn. Back in my day, girls waited till after the date to text. Guess times changed. His tone dripped with generational sarcasm. The girl gaped, fury boiling into silent rage. After a stalemate, Martin sighed. Look, damage's done. Let me fix it. How about dinner? My treat, anywhere you want. I'll spin this into a story that saves your rep. Glowering, she spun on her heel and marched off. Martin trailed behind, mentally cursing his miscalculation. Using charm and wit, Martin smoothed things over with her friends outside. He offered dinner, but the girls declined, curfews loomed. Instead, he bought them ice cream cones as peace offerings. As they parted in the parking lot, Martin studied the girl's face again. What's your name? Her friends erupted into giggles, whispering excitedly. Smug, she tossed her hair. Haley. Haley midline horizontal ellipsis Haley Dunphy. Martin's brow furrowed. Her smirk vanished. How do you know my last name? You are Haley Dunphy. Martin's gaze sharpened. No wonder you looked familiar. Last time I saw you, you were 6. He gestured at knee height. Used to ride on my shoulders everywhere. Haley blinked, bewildered. Don't you remember me? Martin chuckled. Haley midline horizontal ellipsis I'm your uncle. The color drained from her face. Asterisk flirting with a relative. Asterisk before she could protest, Martin added, call Claire or Phil. I'll drive you home and see them. Haley numbly dialed her mom. Haley. Where are you? We're back from Grandpa's. Claire's voice crackled through the speaker. Claire, it's Martin. Martin Scott. A gasp. Asterisk Martin asterisk. Aunt Katerina's son. Oh my God, it's been years. You vanished after Harvard. Ran into Haley at the movies. Recognized her, she's got your eyes. How's Phil? Alex? Little Luke must be midline horizontal ellipsis what, 10 now. Claire's skepticism melted as Martin rattled off family details. Soon, she ordered him to bring Haley home immediately. Hanging up, Martin spread his arms. Well, niece? How about hug for your long-lost uncle? End of chapter. Chapter 57, Modern Family. An hour later, a sky-blue Porsche 911 parked in front of an ordinary suburban villa on the outskirts of New York City. The moment Martin stepped out of the car, a blonde woman met him and hugged him happily. Martin, midline horizontal ellipsis it's really you. That I can't believe it midline horizontal ellipsis you look even better than when you started college. Martin laughed, Claire, you're also still as stunning as ever. After Claire he gave Phil a hearty hug. Martin, it's been so long. We've all missed you midline horizontal ellipsis, same here, Phil. You look exactly the same. After nearly 10 minutes of catching up at the doorstep, they finally moved inside. The house was a typical American suburban home, bright white and blue walls, a cozy fireplace warming the chilly New York air. The Dunphys introduced their 3 children, Haley Dunphy, the 15-year-old rebellious teen obsessed with dating and makeup, currently Claire's biggest headache. Alex, the 13-year-old bookworm with glasses, who loved outsmarting her siblings. Luke, the youngest, a curly-haired 10-year-old boy who'd just celebrated his birthday a few days before Thanksgiving. Martin ruffled Luke's messy hair and handed him a Spalding basketball. Sorry I missed your birthday party, Luke. This is a belated gift from Uncle Martin. Happy birthday. Claire didn't notice anything special about the ball. You remembered his birthday. That's so sweet. But Phil's eyes widened as he spotted the black signature. LeBron James. Phil snatched the ball before Luke could take it, scrutinizing the signature. Martin midline horizontal ellipsis. Is this real? Would I fake a gift for my favorite nephew? Martin winked. Our firm works with big sports agents. Signed merch is part of the job perks. I almost swiped a Jordan signed ball from a partner, but figured Luke's too young to care. Claire finally grasped the significance. Martin, Luke's too young for something this valuable. Martin waved her off. Consider it compensation for missing 10 years of birthdays. Haley and Alex will get theirs next year. The girls, initially feeling unlucky, lit up. Phil offered a house tour, which ended abruptly when Martin tripped on a broken stair, sending both men tumbling. Oh my God. Are you okay? Claire yelped, rushing over. Martin rubbed his shoulder. I'm fine. Phil, used to such mishaps, raised a hand. I swear I'll fix that stair soon. Martin stifled a laugh. He knew that stair would stay broken for at least another year. Later, after shooing the kids to bed, Claire dragged Martin to the couch for a heart-to-heart. As they talked, Martin reminisced about the family gathering 9 years earlier. Claire was his cousin because Martin's mother, Katerina, and Claire's father, Jay Pritchett, were siblings. Yes, the Jay Pritchett, the 60-something millionaire businessman from Modern Family. Katerina had married a Texas lawyer, distance limiting their interactions, but the Pritchett family's emphasis on kinship kept them close. Katerina had only Martin, while Jay had 2 children, Claire and her younger brother Mitchell. Their last reunion was at Martin's Harvard acceptance party, a star-studded event attended by relatives and his parents' elite friends. Jay proudly introduced Mitchell, freshly graduated from Columbia Law. But the celebration imploded when Mitchell grabbed the mic and came out as gay. In deeply conservative Texas, this was akin to ordering a Big Mac at KFC. The room froze. Even Jay and Claire were mortified, and Katerina, furious at her nephew for humiliating the family, kicked Mitchell out. The party ended in awkward silence. Later, Martin secretly brought Mitchell back and defended him to the family. He respected others' lifestyles, as long as they didn't affect him. But Katerina, steeped in tradition, disowned Jay's family the next day for failing to educate their son. Siblings became strangers overnight. Martin, busy with Harvard and his work, forgot to actively reach out. And 9 years had slipped by. End of chapter. Chapter 58, Sibling Chat. Martin, you mentioned your law firm earlier, so you're a lawyer now? Claire, ever the caring older cousin, pried into his career. Yeah. After majoring in history, I got into Harvard Law 5 years ago. Just earned my JD this year. Now I'm a senior associate at Pearson Hardman. Martin laid out his academic and professional journey without holding back. Claire and Phil listened in growing astonishment, barely recognizing the shy, awkward boy from 9 years ago. Coming from wealth, Claire knew the prestige of the Big Four law firms. A 25-year-old JD grad. A senior associate in 6 months. Unheard of. When Martin mentioned handling a $100 million hotel merger, Claire fist bumped him on his arm. Oh my God. I always knew you were smart. Phil merely smiled, unfazed by his wife's antics. Martin could also only smile, not like he could beat his own trumpet or worse tell the truth. Glancing around, he gestured broadly. This place is great. You guys midline horizontal ellipsis, you've built a happy family. Absolutely. Phil seized the spotlight. A gorgeous wife, 3 amazing kids, all gifts from God. And let's not forget the hard-working, perfect dad who keeps it all together. Martin said, sounding happy for the couple. Phil, I could learn so much from you. You'll have to be my marriage counselor someday. Phil puffed up, mimicking an Italian bow. Anytime, Martin. The conversation turned to Martin's love life. Claire's blissful marriage clashed with his libertine ethos. In past lives, he'd ditched girlfriends for suffocating rules. Now, strictly, no strings attached, the truth too crude for family. Works just midline horizontal ellipsis hectic, Martin deflected, stirring awkward silence. They skirted the real elephant, the family rift from Mitchell's coming out fiasco. Phil's rambling about Luke's birthday mishaps failed to lighten the mood. Martin cut through the tension. How's Uncle Jay? Claire hesitated, glancing at Phil. Martin recalled Modern Family's plot. Jay, now 63, had divorced and remarried a Colombian bombshell decades younger, with an adopted son to boot. Mitchell, the gay lawyer, rounded out the modern chaos. I heard Jay remarried a stunning woman. And Mitchell's with his partner now? Can I see photos? Martin blurted. Claire gaped. How did you midline horizontal ellipsis? Martin shrugged. We're still family. I kept tabs. Claire spoke up, looking very sad and on the verge of crying. Martin midline horizontal ellipsis, we wanted to reach out. Mitchell regrets ruining your party midline horizontal ellipsis, we're family, Martin echoed, while shooting Phil a help me look. As Claire gushed, Martin mused, this family's drama rivals Leonard and Penny's future. End of chapter. Chapter 59. Morning routine. Martin left his cousin Claire's house after 1 a.m. Claire had insisted he stay the night to meet their Uncle Jack and Mitchell, but Martin waved her off. Reconnecting with estranged family after years of feud required finesse, not haste. Of course, he'd forgotten one thing. Claire had the patience of a caffeinated squirrel. Though Thanksgiving offered just a one-day break, Martin extended his holiday through the weekend. By 6:15 a.m. on Black Friday, his internal clock dragged him awake. Bleary-eyed, he shuffled to the kitchen in his robe to prep breakfast for his roommates. No, Martin wasn't a morning person, just the earliest riser. His culinary skills? Minimal. But assembling a breakfast was idiot-proof: whole wheat toast, tomato slices, ham, purple cabbage, and a fried egg stacked into a sandwich, diagonally sliced. Add milk. Done. Bang bang bang, the door shuttered. Penny, in pajamas and bedhead, barged in. Morning, Penny. You look stunning today. Martin called over his shoulder, chopping tomatoes. Try looking at me before lying, she snorted, flopping onto a stool. If Sheldon was here right now, he would cite 10 studies proving genuine surprise lasts 0.3 seconds. Anything longer's fake. Penny gagged. Ugh, don't Sheldon me before coffee. Martin glanced up. No men here worth dressing up for. Between the horny nerds and the prepubescent critic? Penny smirked. Though you midline horizontal ellipsis, she eyed him theatrically. Say the word, and I'll rock the Emperor's new clothes for you. Martin slid a plate toward her. Eat, you menace. Sheldon emerged on schedule, freezing at the sight of Penny. You're awake before noon. Did hell freeze over? Let me chew, you robot. Leonard stumbled in next, drawn by the chaos. Martin handed him a sandwich as Penny declared, Eat up, guys. We hit the mall in 30. The trio groaned. Black Friday crowds were their kryptonite. Martin, you're really skipping. Penny pressed. Crowds give me hives, he said, tapping his wallet pocket reflexively, a habit from past lives, and pickpockets. Sheldon bristled. Why does he get a pass? Because, Martin sipped milk, I earn enough to ignore 50% off DC merch. You need discounts. Penny mimed shooting Sheldon. Asterisk bang, asterisk, end of chapter, chapter 60, shopping frenzy. In the end, Martin caved and joined the shopping squad. Even with $50,000 in his bank account, the siren call of Black Friday discounts proved irresistible, despite the tsunami of humanity flooding Broadway. Should have taken the subway, Leonard muttered, inching his rust-bucket sedan through crowds clutching 50% OFF. Loot bags. Martin white-knuckled the back seat, hands instinctively shielding his wallet pocket. Penny snorted. You look like a rookie at Pride Parade. How about you enjoy Sheldon's Wi-Fi without my help? Martin shot back. I'll help you, Leonard chimed in, earning a triumphant smirk from Penny. After a gridlocked half-hour, they parked a mile from Macy's flagship store, ground zero for middle-class retail warfare. The scene inside resembled a zombie apocalypse. Women shrieked, clawing at discounted blouses, back off, skank. It's mine. You wish, Walmart reject. Leonard paled. Is this midline horizontal ellipsis asterisk a normal asterisk? Swap T-virus for Tory Burch, Martin deadpanned, still guarding his back pockets. For men with standard builds, shopping offered one perk, no fitting rooms. Martin breezed through racks, plucking sweaters and jeans like produce. Need to try these? A flirty clerk eyed his biceps. Nope. Martin gestured to Sheldon's pile of graphic tees. The clerk pouted. But I could midline horizontal ellipsis asterisk help star dot. Martin deflected by rambling about his cousin's surprise reunion, to Sheldon's visible agony. Meanwhile, Penny and Leonard emerged from fitting rooms, defeated. Let's split up, Sheldon demanded. Martin shops on an average in 6 minutes. Leonard takes 17. You? He glared at Penny. 35 minutes of indecision per store. I need to see how clothes fit. Given your income and midline horizontal ellipsis asterisk fluctuating asterisk BMI, go. Penny shoved him toward Martin. Nerd Squad versus Normies. As groups parted, Martin's phone rang. Uncle Jay. His voice cracked. The call was arranged by Cousin Claire to have him summoned him to a family dinner. New members. Decades-old feud. Martin's face morphed into a meme-worthy hashtag. Big family reunion tonight, he told the group weekly. Penny lit up. Rockefellers? Vanderbilts? Big as in midline horizontal ellipsis asterisk loud asterisk, Martin eyed his shopping bags. I'm gonna need more wine. End of chapter, chapter 61, the family reunion at 4 p.m. On Black Friday, traffic into Manhattan remained gridlocked, but the outbound lanes flowed freely. Martin arrived absurdly early at his uncle's estate, staring at the gated mansion through his windshield. What if Jay's busy midline horizontal ellipsis or busy with Gloria? As he debated finding a coffee shop, the gates swung open. A procession of familiar faces spilled out, Claire, Phil, and strangers Martin instinctively waved at. Parking hastily, he stepped into a bear hug from the burly patriarch. "You're early," Jay Pritchett barked, thumping Martin's back. "I should have come sooner," Martin murmured, guilt tightening his throat. Jay held him at arm's length. "Look at you, handsome, sharp, still boxing. Krav Maga now. But I keep up the basics." Jay's approval radiated as he introduced Gloria, Colombian bombshell, new wife, and stepmother to 11-year-old Manny. Hola Martine. Gloria air-kissed his cheeks, leaving crimson imprints. "Jay talks about you like you're the second coming." Martin eyed her impossible curves. "Colombia let its national treasure emigrate." Gloria cackled. "Score," Manny extended a tiny hand. "Manny. Not money." "Finally, I have been dethroned from the youngest tittle," Martin grinned. "No more cheek-pinching aunties for me." The reunion crescendoed with Mitchell Pritchett, red-haired, twitchy, and braced for judgment. "Mitchell." Martin engulfed him. "That beard's daddy material." Mitchell dissolved into tears. "I'm so sorry about your graduation party." "Water under the bridge," Martin interrupted. "But please don't put snot on my coat, or I might break your nose." "Jay taught me how." Laughter erupted. Even Cameron, Mitchell's hulking husband, chuckled through his outrage over their daughter's hyphenated surname. Pritchett Tucker was too mainstream. Mitchell fibbed as Cameron stormed inside. Jay slung an arm around Martin. "You'll get used to the drama." In the chaos, baby Lily Pritchett Tucker gurgled in Martin's arms, a tiny firecracker. End of chapter. Comment, like and subscribe this channel. Thanks for watching.